Chapter 232. There were 10 courtyards in the inner palace, and each courtyard had 10,000 sword towers. Among them, the yellow level sword tower had the most, with 5,000. Next was the profound level sword tower with 3,000, followed by the earth level sword tower with 1,900, and lastly, the heaven level sword tower with 100. The spirit chi in the yellow level sword tower was 50% denser and purer than the outside world, while the spirit chi in the profound level sword tower was 100% denser and purer than the outside world. However, Chu Mu felt that it was still not enough. With his current strength, Chu Mu felt that he could continue to challenge the earth level sword tower. The spirit chi in the earth level sword tower was 15% denser and purer than the outside world. The efficiency of cultivation would be higher, and naturally the progress would be faster. After the deacon repeated his question, Chu Mu gave an affirmative answer. Thus, the deacon sent out a notice to the 10 profound level sword tower students that Chu Mu had listed, telling them to prepare for the challenge. The challenge would be tomorrow. Chu Mu returned to his yellow level sword tower. For him, if he won 10 consecutive battles tomorrow, he would be able to challenge the earth level sword tower students. After defeating them, he would be able to move into the earth level sword tower. As for the 2,800 profound level sword tower, he was too lazy to move it again. However, if he was defeated, he would have to move out of the profound level sword tower and move into the yellow level sword tower. Fortunately, there was still a lot of space in the yellow level sword tower. If he wanted to obtain the right to live in the profound level sword tower again, he would have to wait until next month to apply for the challenge. This was a small restriction for those who were defeated by the academy. Meng Chao hated Chu Mu to the core. There was still half a month until next month, which meant that he had to cultivate in the yellow level sword tower for half a month. For him, who was already used to the spirit chi in the profound level sword tower, this was a terrible result. I hope you are defeated. Meng Chao cursed. This Chu Mu is truly too arrogant. After challenging 10 of our yellow rank sword towers members and defeating one of our Xian rank sword towers members, he unexpectedly still wants to continue the challenge. Moreover, he's challenging our Xian rank sword towers members. Chao Lei was unable to restrain his anger because Chu Mu had chosen him as one of the 10 people to challenge. Chao Lei did not have much confidence in dealing with Chu Mu. He knew Meng Chao's strength very well. He was not inferior to him. If Meng Chao was defeated so easily, how could Chao Lei be Chu Mu's opponent? If it was a normal challenge, it would not be strange for him to be defeated. However, the problem was that they all believed that Chu Mu was here for the Proud Sword Gang. He was provoking the Proud Sword Gang in the name of a challenge, which was a legitimate reason to humiliate the Proud Sword Gang. Therefore, if they were defeated by Chu Mu, regardless of what others would say, they would feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts. Listen, even if you are not his match, you must remember to use your full strength from the beginning. You must injure him as a small revenge for his provocation, Huang Xiaoan said with a sinister smile. The others nodded in agreement. The night passed quickly. The 6th transformation of the 9 transformations of heavenly origin was more profound and mysterious than the 5th transformation. It was impossible to master it in a short period of time. However, Chu Mu was not in a hurry now. With his current cultivation of Qi transformation, it was 1 in a million if he could master the 5th transformation. Other than resting that night, Chu Mu's focus was on the secrets of heavenly origin. Congratulations, he had finally mastered the secrets of heavenly origin. It was indeed very convenient for him to have a strong comprehension ability. Once the secrets of heavenly origin was mastered, Chu Mu felt as if his body was undergoing some strange changes. He could not tell what the changes were, but he could clearly feel that the changes were taking place. The changes lasted for a whole night. After careful examination, Chu Mu found that his phantom steps and windwalk had indeed improved from the advanced level to the super level. However, His sweeping gale movement was still at the advanced level. It seems that the secrets of heavenly origin can only improve one movement technique and one movement technique. But even so, it's still very good. Chu Mu thought to himself, I've already mastered the super-level windwalk movement technique. Maybe it's because I created it myself. However, after the Phantom Steps was upgraded to the super level, I'm only at the level of Deshang. This Phantom Steps is more profound and mysterious than before. I need to spend some time to understand it. He got up and left the Sword Tower, heading to the 100 Affair Hall branch again. You're here. Let's go. It was the same deacon from yesterday. When he saw Chu Mu, he smiled and followed Chu Mu to the Sword Tower area. Most of the students living in the Sword Tower are at the initial level of Qi transformation. Among the 10 people you've challenged, one of them is at the peak of the initial level of Qi transformation. He's relatively strong. You'll be the last to challenge him, the deacon said. Chu Mu nodded. He did not care. Whether he challenged first or last, it was still a challenge, and he would still be defeated. The first person to challenge was Chao Lei. Chao Lei did not say a word. His expression was cold. As soon as the challenge started, he immediately drew his sword and used his super-level sword technique. His sword swept up purple lightning and struck towards Chu Mu. The air crackled, giving off crackling sounds that made one's scalp go numb. Countless purple arcs of lightning leaped about in the air, and the area within 10 meters was filled with purple lightning. Each lightning bolt was as thick as an arm and had 40% of the concept of thunder fused into it. Its power was extremely terrifying. If it were any other initial level Qi transformation sword artist, they would have been injured or even killed by such a sudden and powerful attack. However, Chu Mu had entered battle mode from the beginning. When Chao Lei drew his sword, he could feel the tyrannical sword Qi fluctuation. He knew that Chao Lei's attack was definitely powerful. Chu Mu used the super-level windwalk movement technique and infused it with 47% of the wind concept. His body was constantly changing. Bolts of lightning shot towards Chu Mu, but they could not touch him. The clear wind sword was unsheathed. With a clear sound, Chu Mu's sword, which was wrapped in Xiantian sword Qi, flashed with a gloomy light. The sword pierced out like a hot knife through butter. Even the arm-thick lightning could not resist it. It was defeated by Chu Mu's sword. The gloomy sword condensed with Xiantian sword Qi was even more powerful under the high-speed vibration. The lightning was shattered, and Chao Lei's protective sword Qi was also destroyed. The power of the gloomy sword was exhausted. Chao Lei hurriedly used his sword to block. Chu Mu turned his sword and avoided Chao Lei's sword. He used the body of his sword to hit Chao Lei's chest. With a bang, the power exploded. Chao Lei's whole body was sent flying. He felt his blood and Qi churning. His chest was tight and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Before he could even stand firm, a cold light flashed in front of his eyes. A sharp and cold feeling came from his throat. You lost, Chu Mu said indifferently and sheathed his sword. One win in a row, the deacon said with a smile. Just now, Chao Lei had used a killing move right off the bat, causing him to jump in fright. In that situation, even if it was him, he wouldn't be able to react in time and would definitely be in a difficult situation. He thought that Chu Mu would fail miserably at such an easy task. He didn't expect Chu Mu to defeat Chao Lei unscathed. The deacon did not understand how Chu Mu defeated Chao Lei. Chao Lei clenched his fists. He was very unwilling to accept this result. He had used his full strength in an instant, but he was still defeated. That sword was really terrifying. If it was an enemy, it would have been enough to kill him. The second battle began. Chao Lei also used a killing move right from the start. He did not hold back at all. It was as if he was Chu Mu's mortal enemy. But at the same time, under Chu Mu's gloomy sword, not only could he not defeat Chu Mu, but he was also easily defeated by Chu Mu. 2 wins in a row. The deacon smiled. The third battle began even before the deacon announced the start of the battle. He also used his full strength and did not hold back. He wanted to kill Chu Mu directly. Chu Mu was a little angry. This time, he used more strength. The gloomy sword, which was mixed with the tyrannical Tianyuan sword qi, directly broke Chao Lei's protective sword qi and sent him flying. He spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and fell to the ground, groaning. In terms of cultivation level, Chu Mu was only at the beginner level of qi transformation. In terms of the density of sword qi, Chu Mu might be a little inferior to them, but in terms of the purity of sword qi, the Tianyuan sword qi at the fifth transformation was a little better than them. The density of sword qi was related to a longer battle, while the purity of sword qi could be more powerful in an instant. Chu Mu's supreme level body movement, gloomy sword, and Tianyuan sword qi, which was a little purer than theirs, combined with Chu Mu's unpredictable swordsmanship, was definitely not something they could resist. 3 wins in a row. The deacon found that he seemed to like this feeling. As for the people who were injured, it was none of their business as long as no one was killed. 4 wins in a row. 5 wins in a row. 6 wins in a row. 7 wins in a row. Chao Lei defeated them one by one. Every one of them used his full strength without holding back, but in the end, he was sent flying and injured by Chu Mu. They are all from the Proud Sword Gang. It seems that your previous challenge made the Proud Sword Gang plan to hurt you and make you unable to challenge them, the deacon said with a little dissatisfaction. He was not afraid of the Proud Sword Gang, because he was the deacon of the Inner Mansion's Hall of 100 Affairs. Unless they were from the 1 hall, 2 pavilions, and 3 alliances, he would not be afraid of other organizations. Another figure was sent flying, spitting out blood, and hit the seal, creating countless ripples. The deacon could also see that these people's ruthlessness had angered Chu Mu, so Chu Mu had used a little more strength, but it was very satisfying. At this moment, the deacon was on the same side as Chu Mu. 8 wins in a row. There are only 2 left. After you defeat them, you can challenge the students of the Earth-level Sword Tower, the deacon said. 9 wins in a row. The last one is the strongest. You have to be careful. The 10th student that Chu Mu challenged was indeed rather strong. Chu Mu had to use a full 10 strikes to defeat his opponent, even when he was holding back. Congratulations, you have the right to challenge the students of the Earth-level Sword Tower. Who do you want to challenge? The deacon asked. Him. Chu Mu pointed at the name on the list. Huang Xiaoan. I will arrange it for you immediately, the deacon said with a smile. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 233. I don't know if I should praise your boldness or mock your ignorance. Huang Xiaoan looked at Chu Mu with a sneer and said coldly, Do you think you can defeat a Qi transformation Desheng just because you defeated an initial success Qi transformation student? I will use my sword to tell you that the difference between each level of the Qi transformation realm is very obvious. There is no comparison between the entry level and the Desheng. I only need 3 moves to defeat you. Chu Mu looked at Huang Xiaoan indifferently and said unhurriedly, If you can't defeat me in 3 moves, isn't that the same as slapping yourself in the face? If I say I will defeat you in 3 moves, then I will defeat you in 3 moves. Otherwise, it will be my loss. Huang Xiaoan was very confident in himself because his strength was not something an ordinary Qi transformation Desheng could compare with. It was easy for him to defeat an initial success Qi transformation student with 1 move. Even many Qi transformation Desheng swordsmen were no match for him. In the last Sword Technique King competition, Huang Xiaoan was ranked 832. The deacon seemed to recall something and said. Chu Mu suddenly understood. Perhaps this was what Huang Xiaoan was relying on. A smug look flashed across Huang Xiaoan's face as he continued, That's right. My sword technique is what I rely on. How about it? Do you dare to fight me with pure sword technique without using Xiantian sword chi, killing moves, and artistic conception? If you don't dare, you can refuse. I won't laugh at you. As an initial success sword grandmaster, Chu Mu knew very well that the more profound one's mastery of basic sword techniques was, the more powerful one's strength would be. When the same move was executed by someone with a different mastery of basic sword techniques, there would be a clear difference in terms of transformation and power. It could be said that in the sword chi realm, mastery of basic sword techniques was not important. But in the chi transformation realm, the importance of mastery of basic sword techniques began to show. For a swordsman in the chi transformation realm, basic swordsmanship was an indispensable foundation. The deeper the foundation, the greater the benefit. Chu Mu even felt that the cultivation of ancient sword techniques also required a certain level of attainment in basic sword technique. It was not just a requirement of the realm. Then let me see how you can defeat me in 3 strikes. Chu Mu said faintly. Huang Shaoan's attainment in swordsmanship couldn't pique his interest. His clumsy attempt to goad Chu Mu into action was directly ignored by Chu Mu. Huang Shaoan smiled coldly and slowly pulled out his sword. As the sword left its scabbard, a sharp aura was released from his body. Several sword light dazzled the eyes as he thrust his sword forward. Huang Shaoan's swordsmanship was equivalent to a small success swordsmanship master, which was even more profound than Situ Ko's. With such attainment in swordsmanship, it was no wonder that he dared to propose a pure swordsmanship battle to Chu Mu. Perhaps this was what Huang Shaoan had planned from the beginning. He wanted to use his own strengths to fight. In his opinion, Chu Mu, a swordsman who was less than 20 years old and came from a low-grade sword sect, couldn't possibly compare with him, who was already in his 20s and came from a high-grade sword sect. This was because Chu Mu had comprehended the 2 realms of wind and cloud. These 2 realms were enough to slow him down, leaving him with little time to cultivate swordsmanship. When they learned about Chu Mu, they had already investigated Chu Mu's background. That was no secret. In order to defeat Chu Mu within 3 moves, Huang Shaoan didn't hold back at all. He directly displayed several sword light. These sword light didn't have much power, but it could make people's eyes blur and confuse their vision to defeat their opponent. Unfortunately, this was only the lowest level of sword light among the levels of swordsmanship that Chu Mu had classified. Moreover, Chu Mu's vision sword had reached perfection, so he could easily see through the real situation. Without even unsheathing his sword, Chu Mu took a step forward. After several sword light, Huang Shaoan's sword missed. He was slightly startled and felt that it shouldn't be possible. Under the cover of several dazzling sword light, his opponent couldn't have dodged it. Was it a coincidence? Huang Shaoan had already determined that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was inferior to his, so he thought that Chu Mu's dodge was a coincidence. Was it a coincidence? The deacon who was watching the battle frowned and thought to himself. Previously, when Chu Mu easily defeated those people, he was also watching. However, Chu Mu's sword technique attainments were too profound, far beyond what he could compare to. Therefore, no matter how he looked, he couldn't see the reason. He simply didn't know that this was something that could only be possessed when one's sword technique reached a certain level. Naturally, he wouldn't think in that direction. 3 moves to defeat you. 3 moves, no more than 1 move. Huang Shaoan secretly shouted and slashed out again. Previously, there were 3 sword light. This time, there were 4 sword light. With 1 more, it was more difficult. The sword he thought would definitely win once again missed. In fact, he didn't even see clearly how it missed. Even the deacon blinked his eyes and found it hard to tell. Because of the 4 sword lights and Chu Mu's speed, he was fast. 1 more move, Chu Mu said indifferently. Huang Shaoan's face turned ashen. If he couldn't defeat Chu Mu with 1 more move, then he would have no place to show his face. 3rd move, you'll lose. With an explosive shout, Huang Shaoan thrust his sword forward. In an instant, 5 dazzling sword lights burst out, confusing one's vision and dazzling one's eyes. Huang Shaoan's thrust was incomparably fierce, as fast as lightning, and as earth-shattering as it swept up a fierce whistling sound. The ferocious sword once again missed. Where is he? When the sword light dissipated, Huang Shaoan looked in front of him. There was no one there. He was puzzled. 3 moves have passed. Not only did you not defeat me, you didn't even touch me. You lost. A faint voice sounded behind him. Huang Shaoan was startled and quickly turned around. No, this doesn't count. Huang Shaoan said, you just kept dodging. This doesn't count at all. Come, let's fight again. Give it your all. I want you to know the difference between you and me. If he lost, not only would he have to move to the yellow level sword tower, he would also become a laughingstock. If he was defeated by a student of the same level, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, he lost to a student of the Qi transformation realm. Moreover, he took the initiative to propose to defeat him with 3 moves of pure swordsmanship. In an instant, he lost everything. The deacon frowned and said coldly, Huang Shaoan, I still remember what you said before. If you can't defeat Chu Mu in 3 moves, you lose. Don't tell me you don't want to admit it? I don't care if you admit it or not. In short, I have recorded everything you said. You lost this challenge. The deacon said coldly and announced the final result. Huang Shaoan's face turned pale. He didn't expect that his well-planned plan would end up like this. He couldn't accept it. However, he didn't dare to offend the deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs. The Proud Sword Gang was only an organization for students, while the Hall of Hundred Affairs belonged to the Sword Mansion. The two couldn't be compared. In the end, no matter how unwilling Huang Shaoan was, he could only pack up his things and leave the Earth-level sword tower. He went to the yellow-level sword tower. Before he left, he glared at Chu Mu fiercely, as if he wanted to imprint Chu Mu in his eyes. This is called shooting yourself in the foot. After Huang Shaoan left, the deacon laughed. He could also see that Huang Shaoan had been scheming from the beginning. Congratulations, you have won the challenge. You have obtained the right to live in the Earth-level sword tower. The deacon laughed. Sorry to trouble you. Chu Mu smiled. You don't plan to continue the challenge next, right? The deacon joked. Not now, but maybe in the near future. Chu Mu said. Good, then I will look forward to that day. At that time, I will continue to be the witness. The deacon laughed. After that, the deacon brought Chu Mu to the Hall of Hundred Affairs to obtain the right to live in the Earth-level sword tower. Chu Mu's identity sword token still needed to fit the seal of the sword tower. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to enter. After everything was done, Chu Mu moved to the Earth-level sword tower in the Earth-level sword tower. The second floor of the yellow-level sword tower, the third floor of the profound-level sword tower, and the fourth floor of the Earth-level sword tower. The first floor of the Earth-level sword tower was the same as the other sword towers. It was a place for sword practice, but it was twice as big as the yellow-level sword tower. The second floor wasn't for living, but was similar to a parlor. The third floor had a bed, table, and so on. There was also a bathroom and so on. It was specially used for living. After changing his clothes on the third floor, Chu Mu went to the fourth floor. As the highest floor, it was empty. Chu Mu was surprised. There was only a 1-meter-wide futon in the center of the fourth floor. It seems that this floor is specially used for cultivation. Chu Mu said softly. He could clearly feel that the spirit qi on the fourth floor was denser than the other 3 floors. It seemed that the spirit qi absorbed from the outside world was all concentrated on this floor. As a result, the division of labor in the entire sword tower was very clear. The density and purity of the spirit qi here is indeed not something that the yellow-level sword tower can compare with. Chu Mu said softly after carefully sensing the spirit qi. 15% and 50%. That was the difference between 0, 5 times and 1, 5 times. It was very obvious. If I cultivate in a place like this, my progress will be much faster. For a moment, Chu Mu couldn't wait to cultivate. Although he had completed the 50th cycle, the restriction of the Qi transformation realm was not as obvious as the sword Qi transformation realm. What's more, it had been several hours since the dawn of the cultivation. Sitting cross-legged on the futon, which was very comfortable, Chu Mu got rid of all distracting thoughts. After 3 breaths, he entered a state of cultivation. He moved the sword Qi according to the 6th cycle of the 9 transformations of heaven origin. In an instant, the spirit Qi on the 4th floor gathered and surrounded Chu Mu like rivers flowing into the sea. Chu Mu could clearly feel the rich and pure spirit Qi around him being absorbed into his body through his pores. It was quickly assimilated by the sword Qi of heaven origin and transformed into sword Qi of heaven origin. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 234. He actually succeeded in the challenge and obtained the right to live in the Earth-level sword tower. Liang Haishan's face was filled with disbelief when he heard the news. It was normal for Chu Mu to succeed in challenging the profound level sword tower, but the Earth-level sword tower, on the 4th floor of the Earth-level sword tower, Chu Mu held a spirit stone in his right hand and continuously absorbed the pure spirit Qi from it. At the same time, the rich and pure spirit Qi in the 4th floor quickly flowed and entered Chu Mu's body through his pores. The spirit Qi in the outside world was constantly being absorbed and purified by the spirit gathering and spirit tempering arrays in the sword tower, then poured into the 4th floor and was absorbed by Chu Mu. Under the 2-pronged approach, Chu Mu could feel that the heavenly sword Qi in his meridians was becoming more and more vigorous, and was constantly moving towards the initial success of the Qi transformation stage. After completing the 50th cycle, Chu Mu's meridians had basically reached their limit. Chu Mu stopped and the heavenly sword Qi returned to his dantian and slowly rotated. Chu Mu opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of murky white Qi. It shot out like a sword and pierced through the air. He opened his right hand and there was a spirit stone in his palm. The white and gray color of the stone was the same, as expected of a mid-grade spirit stone. The spirit Qi contained in it is not something that a low-grade spirit stone can compare with in terms of density and purity. Chu Mu found that the low-grade spirit stone could no longer satisfy him. Perhaps it was because his sword Qi had transformed into Xiantian sword Qi, but the effect of using a low-grade spirit stone was not as obvious as before. Therefore, Chu Mu switched to using a mid-grade spirit stone. The mid-grade spirit stone did not disappoint Chu Mu. It felt like he was using a low-grade spirit stone to cultivate in the sword Qi realm. The effect was amazing. At this rate, I can break through to the initial success of the Qi transformation stage in about half a year. The Qi transformation stage was completely different from the sword Qi transformation stage. The gap between the sword Qi realm was not particularly large. However, when one reached the Qi transformation realm, the gap between the initial stage and the initial stage was very obvious. For example, many of the inner mansion students had been in the inner mansion for almost a year, but they were still stuck at the Qi transformation realm, unable to break through to the small success realm. There were also some who had been in the inner mansion for more than a year and had only broken through to the small success realm of the Qi transformation realm. They were still far from Deshang. In addition to the grade of one's cultivation talent, it was also directly related to the surrounding environment and the level of one's cultivation technique. Think about the elders of the low-grade sword sects, such as Elder Yao Ri of the Qinglan sword sect. He was almost 60 years old, but his cultivation level was only at the peak of the small success stage of Qi transformation. But now, he might have broken through to Qi transformation Deshang. With Chu Mu's current strength, it would be easy for him to defeat Elder Yao Ri. After finishing his cultivation, Chu Mu took out the Sword Art of Shocking Wind and continued to read it. He found that the process of comprehending the sword art of shocking wind helped him comprehend the essence of wind. Now, his essence of wind had reached 47% and was not far from 48%. It seemed that he could break through at any time. Involuntarily, Chu Mu was looking forward to the moment when his essence of wind reached 50%. Then, he could begin to practice the ancient sword art, the sword art of shocking wind. Because he wanted to improve his essence of wind to 50% as soon as possible, Chu Mu temporarily stopped comprehending the essence of cloud, essence of gold, and sword momentum. Except for the cultivation of the 9 rotation points of heaven yuan, he spent all his time comprehending the essence of wind. He even temporarily put aside the cultivation of the basic swordsmanship. While reading the sword art of shocking wind, all kinds of mysteries about the wind appeared in his mind. Unknowingly, Chu Mu felt a shock in his mind. His comprehension of the essence of wind had deepened a little. He knew that his essence of wind had reached 48%, which was much faster than he had expected. There was no clear division of the essence of wind. It was just a judgment based on one's own feelings or various experiences. According to my current progress, I might be able to reach 50% essence of wind within a month. Chu Mu thought to himself, as expected, breaking through to the Qi transformation realm is not only a great leap in cultivation, but also a great improvement in my soul and comprehension. Moreover, I can feel that compared to the sword Qi realm, the Qi transformation realm is more suitable for comprehending the essence of wind. This is because during the breakthrough, one can communicate with the outside world and have a preliminary contact with it. However, if one could comprehend the essence of wind in the sword Qi realm, it would be equivalent to building a good foundation. Once one broke through to the Qi transformation realm, the speed of comprehending the essence of wind would increase. It would obviously surpass those who had only comprehended the essence of wind after breaking through to the Qi transformation realm. Suddenly Chu Mu frowned. He felt his identity sword token vibrate. The seal of the sword tower had been triggered. Putting down the shocking wind sword art, Chu Mu went downstairs in a flash and appeared next to the window on the 3rd floor. The 4th floor was sealed to allow people to cultivate better. He saw 3 people standing outside the seal of the sword tower. One of them was using his finger to release sword Qi to attack the seal, creating countless ripples. After thinking for a while, Chu Mu went downstairs to the 1st floor and slowly walked out. He's out. The student who had released the sword Qi to attack the seal immediately stopped. Of these 3 people, 2 stood at the front and 1 stood at the back. Chu Mu looked over and noticed that the sword aura of the 2 people in front had surpassed the small success stage. Compared to Huang Shaoan, they were slightly stronger. They should also be at the large success stage of transforming Qi. As for the one in the back, he couldn't see through his cultivation. It was more profound than Qi transformation Deshang. He should be at the peak of the Qi transformation realm. Chu Mu walked in front of the seal, separated from the other party. "Hey, open the seal." The student who had attacked the seal said coldly. "What's the matter?" Chu Mu stood still and asked indifferently. "Back off." The student who had attacked the seal was angry. Just as he was about to step forward and say something, an indifferent voice came from behind him. Immediately, the swordsman who seemed to be at the peak of the Qi transformation realm took a step forward and appeared in front of the seal, facing Chu Mu directly. "You probably don't know who I am. My name is Zhao Longquan. I'm looking for you to solve some problems. Open the seal." The swordsman at the peak of the Qi transformation realm stared at Chu Mu for 3 breaths and said indifferently, "Just say what you want." Chu Mu's tone was equally indifferent. He wasn't someone who liked to cause trouble, nor did he like to pretend. However, if someone respected him, he would respect them tenfold. "I told you to open the seal, so open it. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Don't you know who he is? Let me tell you, he is the deputy leader of the Ao Sword Gang." A swordsman at the peak of the Qi transformation realm, Deshang, who was standing behind him, said angrily. "Ao sword gang, then there's nothing more to say." Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a hint of understanding. He immediately turned around. Needless to say, these guys were here to cause trouble. "Stop." Zhao Longquan saw that Chu Mu immediately turned around when he heard the name of the Ao sword gang. A hint of disdain flashed across his face. Zhao Longquan was instantly angered. "Do you want to completely offend the Ao sword gang and become our mortal enemy? From the beginning, it was the Ao sword gang that caused trouble for me." Chu Mu calmly turned around and said indifferently, "No matter what, this time, I'm here to solve the problem." Zhao Longquan was indeed worthy of being a vice-sect leader. He immediately regained his calm demeanor, but it was unknown if he had truly calmed down in his heart. "You used the excuse of challenging the right to reside in the Sword Tower to continuously defeat the members of our sect, and even caused some of them to be injured. I think that you have gone too far. Then how do you want to solve it?" Chu Mu said with an indifferent expression. "It's very simple. The cause of this matter is none other than your space bracelet and those 300,000 academic credits," Zhao Longquan said with a tone that was neither slow nor fast. It was as if all logic was on his side. "If you hand over the space bracelet and 300,000 academic credits to me now, this matter will be written off. The grudge between you and the Ao sword gang will be resolved. I do have the space bracelet, but I have used up all my academic credits. What do you think I should do?" Chu Mu said with a hint of mockery in his eyes. When he mentioned the space bracelet, Zhao Longquan's eyes looked through the seal and fell on Chu Mu's wrist. Unfortunately, his eyes were covered by his sleeves and could not be seen. "You used up all your academic credits?" Zhao Longquan frowned. "That's fine. Give me the space bracelet and write me an IOU. The 300,000 academic credits can be slowly returned as long as it is paid off within a year." Hearing Zhao Longquan's words, Chu Mu suddenly wanted to laugh. He could not even get angry because it was too funny. How could there be such a weirdo in the world? Shaking his head slightly, Chu Mu really did not want to continue talking with this weirdo. Otherwise, who knew what kind of words would come out of his mouth? "Stop, Chu Mu. Listen to me. If you don't solve this matter according to my instructions today, you will become a mortal enemy of the Ao sword gang. With my means, although I can't kill you, I can definitely make you restless. Do you believe me?" Zhao Longquan's anger surged out like a volcanic eruption as he heavily slammed his palm on the seal. Chu Mu's expression turned cold, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. Zhao Longquan's words were equivalent to becoming his enemy. Since they were enemies, he could not be soft-hearted. "Vice Gang Leader Zhao, you're really impressive. Even I have to back off when I hear you." An indifferent voice with a hint of sarcasm came from not far away. A man in a silver robe strode over with a cold expression. "Zhuge Ming, this has nothing to do with you." Zhao Longquan's eyes flashed with a trace of fear. His attitude softened a bit, but he still pretended that he would not back down. "Chu Mu is my friend. You threaten my friend and say it has nothing to do with me." Zhuge Ming walked in front of the seal and looked at Zhao Longquan. The coldness on his face increased the pressure on Zhao Longquan. "Since when can the Ao sword gang be so arrogant that even I don't care about it?" Facing Zhuge Ming's power, Zhao Longquan's nose was dripping with sweat. The other two Qi transforming Deshang swordsmen were even worse. Their expressions changed drastically as they backed off and almost fell down. Zhuge Ming's aura was too strong. "Zhuge Ming, since you want to interfere in the gang's business, Leader Zhu will not stand by and do nothing," Zhao Longquan said in a stern voice, then turned around and left quickly. The other two Qi transforming Deshang swordsmen also hurriedly followed behind. They were a bit embarrassed. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 235. Brother Zhuge, it's good that you came. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to have peace. On the third floor of the Sword Tower, Chu Mu and Zhuge Ming sat on the balcony. There was a small wooden table in the middle with a jug of wine and 2 cups on it. Even if I didn't come, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to you. Zhuge Ming smiled. At first, I thought that you would be able to break through to the Qi transformation realm and become an inner house student, but I didn't expect it to be so fast. It exceeded my expectations. Chu Mu smiled and raised his wine cup. During this period of time, I took on a mission and wasn't in the inner house. I didn't expect you to cause so much trouble as soon as you arrived. When I heard about it when I came back, I was shocked. Zhuge Ming also raised his wine cup and smiled. Sometimes I can't help myself. Chu Mu smiled. That's right. The path of a swordsman is full of twists and turns. As long as we stick to our hearts and hold the sword in our hands, we can cut through all obstacles. Zhuge Ming said with an unshakable firmness and sharpness in his tone. Brother, you're right. You understand the way of our generation. Chu Mu smiled. The friendship between the two was not very deep, but it wasn't very deep either. It was like a friendship between gentlemen. The two of them drank as they talked about the heavens and the earth. They were unrestrained and expressed all sorts of opinions about life and sword technique. During this time, Chu Mu also asked about things he didn't know but could think of. Zhuge Ming's knowledge was broader and he knew more, so he answered Chu Mu one by one. Unknowingly, the sun was setting. Oh right, Chu Mu, the main power of the Proud Sword Gang is concentrated in Astral 9. The current gang leader is called Zhu Tianzhao. He lives in the 3rd Sword Tower and is ranked 45th on the Bronze Sword ranking. He's very strong. If he comes to find trouble with you, don't leave the Sword Tower no matter what, and don't be provoked by him. Zhuge Ming said with a straight face, this is not cowardice, but temporary forbearance. Once you become stronger, you won't have to be afraid anymore. Zhu Tianzhao, 45th on the Bronze Sword list. Chu Mu repeated, thinking of how Han Ruoxue was ranked 53rd despite being so powerful, then 45th must be much stronger than Han Ruoxue. Even now, Chu Mu was not confident that he could defeat Han Ruoxue when she was in the Blood Demon realm, let alone Zhu Tianzhao, who was even stronger. However, this did not mean that Chu Mu was afraid. However, Zhu Tianzhao is an extremely prideful person. He knows his place, so even if he wants to make trouble for you, he won't personally make a move. Zhuge Ming smiled and said, just in case, I'll pay him a visit and talk to him personally. What's senior brother Zhuge's ranking on the Bronze Sword list? Chu Mu asked curiously. 35. Zhuge Ming smiled. Senior brother, what was your ranking in the King of Swordsmanship competition? Chu Mu suddenly changed the topic. 35. Zhuge Ming answered casually, and then showed a hint of surprise. You even know about the King of Swordsmanship competition. There are still more than 4 months until the next King of Swordsmanship competition. Those who enter the top 100 will receive handsome rewards, especially those who enter the top 10. Even if you can't enter the top 100, you can still practice your swordsmanship and improve your swordsmanship by fighting with pure swordsmanship. It's a rare opportunity, so don't miss it. How can I miss such a grand event? Chu Mu smiled. After coming back this time, I will soon go out to carry out another mission. Maybe the next time we meet will be at the King of Swordsmanship competition. Zhuge Ming stood up. I hope you can get a good ranking by then. Senior brother will naturally know. Chu Mu smiled and saw Zhuge Ming off. Everything was so natural, without the slightest abrupt. After Zhuge Ming left, Chu Mu went directly to the 4th floor of the Sword Tower. He took out a blood evil stone from his space wristband and placed it on his palm, feeling the strong evil aura on it. So the blood evil stone is used to train one's willpower. Chu Mu muttered to himself. When he was talking with Zhuge Ming just now, Chu Mu casually asked about the blood evil stone and blood essence. As he couldn't find them in the books in the sword tower, he didn't go to the art repository to check. Zhuge Ming happened to know the effects of the blood evil stone and blood essence. It wasn't a secret, so he told Chu Mu. In fact, the blood evil stone was originally a very ordinary stone. However, because it was eroded by countless amounts of evil aura over the years, its essence gradually changed and it finally became a blood evil stone. In other words, the blood evil stone was a special product. It would only appear in the blood demon realm or somewhere similar to the blood demon realm where the evil aura was dense and endless. It was said that the formation of a low-grade blood evil stone would take at least 100 years, the formation of a mid-grade blood evil stone would take at least 500 years, and the formation of a high-grade blood evil stone would take even longer, at least 1,000 years. As for the formation of a supreme-grade blood evil stone, it was extremely rare. Even Zhuge Ming wasn't sure. The use of the blood evil stone was also very simple. Because of the evil aura on it, it would attack and corrode living things. If one couldn't withstand it, they would lose their mind and become crazy and bloodthirsty. However, some people also found that if one could withstand the corrosion of the evil aura and maintain their original state of mind in the murderous illusions caused by the evil aura, then one's willpower would be significantly improved. As for a swordsman, he was an existence that paid great attention to spirit. The stronger and more condensed the spirit, the more helpful it would be for a swordsman. In fact, whether it was a swordsman or an ordinary person, it was very beneficial for them to condense enough spirit. It was just that for a swordsman, it was more beneficial to have a strong spirit. Moreover, according to Zhuge Ming, using the blood evil stone to sharpen one's willpower, increase the strength of one's spirit, and so on would ultimately be beneficial to the condensing and improvement of one's sword force. It would even be helpful for the more profound sword intent above the sword force. Let me personally experience the effects of the blood evil stone, Chu Mu thought to himself. He dismissed all distracting thoughts and placed the blood evil stone in his hand between his eyebrows. Although his current soul strength was many times stronger than an ordinary person's, he was still unable to actively spread his soul strength. Therefore, the most direct method to let the evil aura corrode his soul was to place the blood evil stone between his eyebrows and directly touch it. He was using a low-grade blood evil stone. Ordinary Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen could use a low-grade blood evil stone to sharpen their willpower once they were prepared. Of course, not everyone could withstand it, but if they couldn't, then they would immediately remove the blood evil stone and be fine. Only a small number of unlucky people would be corroded by the evil aura and lose their minds. Chu Mu's soul strength was many times that of an ordinary swordsman, reaching 10 times. Therefore, although the evil aura of the low-grade blood evil stone would cause an impact to his soul, it wouldn't cause him to lose his mind. As soon as the blood evil stone was placed between his eyebrows, it seemed to have been activated. Streaks of faint red gas spread out and quickly burrowed into Chu Mu's mind from between his eyebrows. The faint red gas was the evil aura. As soon as the evil aura entered between his eyebrows, Chu Mu immediately felt it. He didn't see it with his eyes, but he could clearly see the faint red gas baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it entered between his eyebrows and headed towards his soul. The fiendish blood aura quickly surrounded Chu Mu's soul and seeped into his soul from all directions. Immediately, a faint bloodthirsty killing intent spontaneously arose. Chu Mu didn't resist the corrosion of the fiendish blood aura. This degree of corrosion was nothing in his eyes. His intent was to watch from the side, wanting to see how the fiendish blood aura corroded the soul, causing people to lose their reason and become crazed and bloodthirsty. Although he let it wander, it didn't mean that he didn't care. Chu Mu's mind could mobilize his soul strength at any time and directly extinguish the evil aura. The evil aura from the blood evil stone unceasingly gushed out and entered Chu Mu's mind through between his eyebrows. It pounced on his soul and surrounded it as it unceasingly seeped in. That bloodthirsty killing intent became increasingly clear and intense, but it was completely within Chu Mu's control. This feeling was like his soul had left his body and became a bystander, but the entire situation was in his hands. It's not strong enough. It seems that with my current soul strength, the low-grade blood evil stone can't temper my will. With a thought, his soul's strength immediately condensed into a sword and slashed out. All of the evil aura surrounding his soul was instantly shattered and turned into nothingness in the blink of an eye. He took the blood evil stone from between his eyebrows. This originally light red blood evil stone had now turned grayish-white. There wasn't the slightest fluctuation on it, indicating that the evil aura within it had completely disappeared and it had become an ordinary stone. Since a low-grade blood evil stone won't work, then I'll use a mid-grade blood evil stone. Chu Mu secretly said and took out the mid-grade blood evil stone. If Zhuge Ming knew that Chu Mu was using a mid-grade blood evil stone to temper his will, he would definitely be extremely shocked. Even he wouldn't dare to use a mid-grade blood evil stone to temper his will unless he was completely prepared. Generally speaking, only after breaking through to the Qi High realm would one dare to use a mid-grade blood evil stone to temper their will. Although the soul of a Qi High realm martial artist was not much stronger than a Qi transformation realm martial artist, their soul strength was more condensed and their will was firmer. The red mid-grade blood evil stone's evil aura was even denser and fiercer. As soon as it entered between Chu Mu's eyebrows, it rushed towards Chu Mu's soul at lightning speed and surrounded Chu Mu's soul. Before it even started to corrode, Chu Mu already felt a bloodthirsty killing intent. His mind was already prepared. After carefully sensing the strength of the mid-grade blood evil stone's evil aura, he began to resist the evil aura as it corroded his soul. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt as if the sky and earth were spinning as he was pulled into a bloody purgatory. Everywhere around him was blood red. Sticky blood dripped down unceasingly. All kinds of killing intent and evil aura filled the air. It was so dense that it was like mercury. Chu Mu used his mind as the lead. His soul's strength condensed into a sword and he began to kill in this bloody purgatory. One after another, the bloody figures condensed into human figures. They constantly let out strange and crazy howls. They were not afraid of death, as if they wanted to drag Chu Mu into the abyss forever and become like them. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 236. Chu Mu's blood evil stones came from the blood demon doppelganger of the blood demon doppelganger he met in the blood demon territory. He obtained them from the blood demon doppelganger of the blood demon doppelganger. There were 15 low-grade blood evil stones, 5 mid-grade blood evil stones, and 1 high-grade blood evil stone. Ever since Chu Mu found out about the use of the blood evil stones, he used a low-grade blood evil stone as an experiment. After that, he used a mid-grade blood evil stone to train his willpower. The process of tempering was very straightforward and simple, but it depended on the person. That kind of blood purgatory was filled with blood and corpses everywhere. Not to mention the constant appearance of enemies that could cause one's willpower to collapse. Just that kind of environment and the fact that one had to enter with one's willpower for a long time would cause a normal person to go crazy and lose their mind. In the end, their willpower would collapse and they would become crazy and bloodthirsty. Even if it was a Qi High Realm swordsman, when using a mid-grade blood evil stone to train his willpower, he would not be able to last long. Thus, a mid-grade blood evil stone could allow a normal Qi High Realm swordsman to use it 8 to 10 times. If it was an outstanding Qi High Realm swordsman, they would use it up 5 or 6 times. Even the most outstanding swordsman would use it up 2 or 3 times. But Chu Mu used up a blood evil stone in one go. Moreover, he used up 1 blood evil stone a day. 5 days later, he had used up all 5 mid-grade blood evil stones. If a Chi High Realm swordsman knew about his speed, they would probably be scared silly. The blood evil Chi's effect of training one's willpower was not bad, but there was a limit to everything. Using a blood evil stone to train one's willpower was putting oneself in danger. Normally, after using up a blood evil stone, one would need to rest for at least a month to recover. But for Chu Mu, this recovery process was not necessary. The tolerance of his soul was not something a normal Chi High Realm swordsman could compare with. Mid-grade blood evil stones can indeed help me temper my willpower. However, the effects are not particularly obvious. Chu Mu held a dark red blood evil stone in his hand as he thought to himself, 5 mid-grade blood evil stones have only increased my willpower by a bit and condensed my soul force by a bit. One of the reasons for this is that my soul force is extremely powerful. The other reason is that the mid-grade blood evil stone is too small. Using high-grade blood evil stones is indeed much more effective than using middle-grade blood evil stones. However, the blood evil Chi of high-grade blood evil stones is too dense. Even I don't have much confidence in being able to resist it. If I'm not careful, I might lose my will. It seems that I can only do this for now. I have to find more mid-grade blood evil stones to temper my will. When I have tempered my will to a sufficient degree, I will use high-grade blood evil stones. After saying that, Chu Mu stored the dark red blood evil stone into his spatial bracelet. He had just used this high-grade blood evil stone to temper his willpower. However, the blood evil Chi was too ferocious. It surged like a tide and directly invaded his soul. It was 10 times more ferocious than the mid-grade blood evil stone. If Chu Mu's soul strength wasn't strong enough and his willpower hadn't increased by a lot, allowing him to quickly kill it and remove the blood fiend stone from his forehead, he probably would have fallen into an endless struggle. Even he himself wasn't sure of the outcome. He calmed down and comprehended the shocking wind sword art to comprehend the concept of wind. After some time, Chu Mu left the sword tower and went to the 100 Affairs Hall branch. As soon as he arrived at the 100 Affairs Hall, he was greeted by the deacon who had been the witness of his challenge to the sword tower. "Deacon Lin, can I still use blood evil stones to exchange for credits?" Chu Mu asked straightforwardly. "Yes, you can do it at any time. It doesn't matter if it's blood evil stones or blood essence." Deacon Lin quickly smiled and asked in surprise, "Do you have blood evil stones?" "A little," Chu Mu said. He directly took out 10 low-grade blood evil stones and placed them on the table in front of him. 10 pieces. Deacon Lin heard Chu Mu say that there was a bit and instinctively felt that there should be 1 piece. However, before he could say anything, 10 pieces of blood fiend stone appeared in front of him in a row. The blood fiend aura they emitted caused one's heart to tremble. Although they were only low-grade blood evil stones, 10 of them still surprised him. Although he was surprised, in the end, 10 low-grade blood evil stones and 500,000 credits Chu Mu received were all transferred to his identity sword token. After bidding farewell to Deacon Lin, Chu Mu went to the sword tool pavilion. Chu Mu must have gained a lot from this trip to the blood demon territory. Deacon Lin thought to himself, "I remember that among the many students who entered the blood demon territory, there were only 5 who turned in blood evil stones. The highest number was 3, and they were all low-grade blood evil stones. Perhaps there are still some students who haven't turned in their blood evil stones, but there shouldn't be many. At most, there should be 1 or 2. Chu Mu took out 10 in one go. Maybe he got even more. The fact that the blood demon cores could be exchanged for 310,000 credits was already shocking enough. It even provoked the proud sword gang. If they knew that the real wealth wasn't the blood demon cores, who knows what they would do. Deacon Lin shook his head and smiled. He was still very surprised, but he didn't intend to spread the news. It wouldn't benefit him at all. Instead, it would bring unnecessary trouble to Chu Mu. If I turn in these 10 blood evil stones, I can also get some rewards. The sword tool pavilion wasn't in Astral 9. There was only one sword tool pavilion in the entire inner mansion. It was different from the other 10 academies and existed independently. The sword tool pavilion was directly under the jurisdiction of the sword mansion. Regardless of whether it was the Heavenly King Palace, the sword-wielding pavilion, or the Heavenly Music Pavilion, none of them had the right to interfere. The sword tool pavilion had a total of 4 floors. It was shaped like a sword pagoda, and the floors were arranged from top to bottom. Above the open door was a plaque with the words Sword Pavilion written in red. Every stroke of the plaque was like a treasured sword. Endless sharpness and fierceness shot out. If one's cultivation was not at the Chi transformation realm, they would definitely be intimidated and would not dare to approach. Even a Chi transformation realm swordsman would have to be alert and carefully deal with it. Otherwise, they would be intimidated. With one glance, Chu Mu knew that the words on the plaque had been written by a brilliant swordsman. The person who wrote these words must have extremely high attainments in the way of the sword, Chu Mu thought to himself. He retracted his gaze and walked towards the sword tool pavilion's entrance. Other than Chu Mu, there were also other students who walked into the sword tool pavilion, and there were also some who walked out of the sword tool pavilion. The sword tool pavilion's entrance was very wide and could allow 7 or 8 people to enter at the same time without being crowded. This was the first time Chu Mu had come to the sword tool pavilion. At a glance, he saw many shelves on the first floor. There were even wooden holders on the shelf. Swords were placed on top of the shelves, but because they were sealed, they didn't emit any fierce aura. Beside each wooden holder was a wooden plaque with the corresponding sword's name and introduction written on it, as well as the required exchange for credits. The first floor is filled with low-grade swords. Mid-grade swords should be on the second floor. Chu Mu glanced at the shelves and thought to himself. He walked towards the stairs to the second floor. I didn't expect a low-grade sword to cost at least 50,000 credits. That's right. The reason why Chu Mu had taken out 10 low-grade blood evil stones to exchange for credits was because he wanted to choose a mid-grade sword. Although low-grade swords were good, they were inferior to mid-grade swords in terms of sharpness, toughness, and so on. With a mid-grade sword in hand, the power of one's attacks would increase significantly. As for high-grade swords, Chu Mu didn't think about them. Even if he had enough credits, he wouldn't exchange for a high-grade sword now. The reason was simple. Swords had their own spirituality. If one wanted to use a sword, one's cultivation had to be high enough. Just like how a sword Chi realm swordsman couldn't display the power of a low-grade sword, a Chi transformation realm swordsman couldn't display the power of a high-grade sword. On the contrary, forcefully using a high-grade sword would drag one's body down. Low-grade and mid-grade swords were suitable for Chi transformation realm swordsmen. Although using a mid-grade sword would consume more sword Chi, its power would be greater. Walking quickly to the second floor of the sword tool pavilion, he saw many shelves with wooden holders and swords on them. Besides Chu Mu, there were dozens of other students choosing mid-grade swords on the second floor. There were different types of swords. Not all swords were suitable for one's use. Apart from wind-type, cloud-type, and metal-type swords, the other types of swords can be ignored. Among these 3 types, wind-type mid-grade swords are the best choice because of the wind concept and the shocking wind sword art that I'm about to cultivate. The classification of swords in the sword tool pavilion was even more obvious. Different types of swords were placed on different shelves. This way, the students wouldn't have to go through the trouble of searching. Chu Mu walked directly to the shelf of wind-type swords. Chu Mu glanced at the shelf and saw that all of them were mid-grade swords. There were a total of more than 30 of them. Wind-chasing sword, wind-type mid-grade sword. Able to increase the power of wind-type super sword arts by 20% and wind-type low-grade ancient sword arts by 10%. Main material, rock wind stone. Can be exchanged for 300,000 credits. 300,000 credits. Chu Mu gasped. He expected the price of a mid-grade sword to be extraordinary, but he didn't expect it to be so high. He looked at the second mid-grade wind-type sword. Gale Sword, wind-type mid-grade sword. Able to increase the power of wind-type super sword arts by 20% and wind-type low-grade ancient sword arts by 10%. Due to the fact that it contains gale stones, it can increase the speed of wind-type sword arts by 10%. Main material, rock wind stone, can be exchanged for 400,000 credits, 400,000 credits. However, after thinking about it, it wasn't a big deal. A 10% increase in speed in wind-type sword arts would allow one to gain the upper hand in battle. It was understandable that it would cost an extra 100,000 credit. Chu-Mu looked at the swords one by one. After looking at the simple introduction on each wooden token, he realized that the main material of these wind-type swords was the rock wind stone. According to the slight differences in the swords, the materials would be adjusted accordingly. Very quickly, Chu-Mu looked through all of the 30 middle-rank swords. After muttering to himself for a few breaths of time, he made a decision. He chose the one that suited him better, took out his identity sword badge, and quickly pressed it against the sword's seal. Stop! Suddenly, a shout came from the side. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 237. Chu-Mu's hand paused for a moment before he continued to extend his hand. The identity sword token came into contact with the seal. Immediately, 500,000 credits were deducted and the seal disappeared. A gust of wind came flying from his side. An arm was as fast as lightning trying to grab the mid-grade sword. However, it was still a step too late because the mid-grade sword had already fallen into Chu-Mu's hands. Put down the beheading wind sword. The newcomer was angry as he coldly said. Chu-Mu glanced at him. This person was actually very handsome. The material of his blue robe was excellent. With one look, one could tell that he had an extraordinary background. However, his face was arrogant, as if he was very amazing. The tone of his voice was also full of command. Chu-Mu put away the identity sword token. Holding the mid-grade sword, the beheading wind sword, he turned around and left without saying a word. A gust of wind came and a figure flashed. This person appeared in front of Chu-Mu, blocking Chu-Mu's path. His arrogant face carried a bit of anger. Are you deaf? I told you to put down the beheading wind sword. The other side said word by word. Every word contained an extremely strong edge, causing the air to vibrate. I used my credits to exchange for the beheading wind sword. Why should I put it down? Chu-Mu smiled and said, I took a fancy to this sword 3 days ago. The reason why I didn't take it away these 3 days was because I was delayed by something. Now that I have time to take it, immediately hand over the beheading wind sword to me. I will also transfer 500,000 credits to you. The other side coldly said. The arrogance in his tone could not be concealed. In fact, he was not delayed by something, but because he did not have enough credit. He used these 3 days to gather 500,000 credit. Now that he finally had enough credits, he did not expect that he would be one step slower and let the beheading wind sword be exchanged for by someone else. I am very satisfied with the beheading wind sword, Chu-Mu indifferently said. The meaning of rejection was very obvious. Kid, do you know who I am? Let me give you a piece of advice. The water in the inner palace is very deep. Don't offend someone you don't know about because of a small matter. The handsome blue-robed youth's tone became colder and colder. I really need the beheading wind sword right now. You can wait for a month to exchange, because at that time, the beheading wind sword will be replenished. Chu-Mu immediately understood what was going on. The swords in the sword tool pavilion were basically duplicate. It was similar to mass production. However, after the first batch was produced, it would take a while before the second batch could be produced. Thinking about it, it made sense. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many suitable names in the world to call or name the attributes according to the different attribute. Perhaps only some truly rare swords were unique, or perhaps these swords were all imitations of extremely rare swords. Sorry, I also need the beheading wind sword. You should wait for a month, Chu Mu indifferently said. His tone was neither servile nor overbearing. The other party's attitude was arrogant and aggressive. Chu Mu never fell for it. If the other party could kindly explain to Chu Mu, perhaps Chu Mu would transfer the beheading wind sword to him. You have to hand it over even if you don't want to. With a cold shout, the handsome blue-robed youth bent his hand into a claw. His speed was extremely fast, stirring up a gust of wind. His target was the beheading wind sword in Chu Mu's hand. Suddenly, the claw missed because the beheading wind sword had disappeared. It was kept by Chu Mu in the space bracelet. The other party suddenly became angry and shouted, "Immediately hand over the beheading wind sword." At the same time, he once again grabbed at Chu Mu, trying to make Chu Mu surrender. However, the claw missed again and Chu Mu's figure appeared a few meters away. The other party became even more angry and attacked again. The Xiantian sword qi condensed and the surrounding air was filled with sharpness. It was as if the surrounding air was being cut. Moreover, the wind sword qi whistled and twisted, forming a prison to bind Chu Mu. Chu Mu's finger was like a sword as he drew a line in the air. The Tianyuan sword qi spread out and immediately cut the wind sword qi. His figure flashed and he escaped. The other party became even more angry and was about to pull out the beheading wind sword. Suddenly, a cold snort rang out. Like a clap of thunder, it exploded in Chu Mu's and the handsome blue-robed youth's ears, causing their bodies to shake uncontrollably. The sword aura in their dantian was also shaken, as if it was about to scatter and disperse. While Chu Mu and the blue-robed youth were shocked, they only felt that their bodies were suppressed by an invisible force and could not move. In front of this force, they were so small and laughable that they did not even have the chance to resist. Completely unable to move, the two figures automatically flew up and quickly flew downstairs. In a flash, they appeared outside the sword tool pavilion like lightning and landed on the ground. Since this is your first offense, I will not pursue it. If there is a next time, I will punish you severely. At the same time, a majestic voice sounded in the ears of Chu Mu and the blue-robed youth, causing a strong impact and shock. After that, Chu Mu and the blue-robed youth only felt that the restraint on their bodies disappeared and they regained the ability to move. However, they could not help but feel a lingering fear. Too powerful, too powerful. They were subdued without even seeing a shadow. The person who called himself an elder was definitely a powerful expert. His cultivation was definitely far beyond the Qi transformation stage, but they did not know which stage he was at. You better remember that my name is Qi Xiaofan. My brother is Qi Tianlei of the Thunder Fire Union. Today's matter will not be forgotten. The blue-robed youth looked back at the sword tool pavilion with a lingering fear. If the other party had wanted to kill him at that moment, he would not have been able to even make a sound, let alone resist. He looked back at Chu Mu with cold and angry eyes. If Chu Mu had obediently handed over the wind-cutter sword to him, none of this would have happened. All of this was because of Chu Mu. One had to admit that his sense of superiority was too strong. Qi Xiaofan turned and left after threatening Chu Mu. At this time, he was not in the mood to ask for the wind-cutter sword from Chu Mu. Moreover, Chu Mu's meaning was very clear. No. Thunder Fire Union. Chu Mu thought for a moment, then smiled without fear. If you want to cause trouble for me, then you have to know who I am first. From the beginning, Chu Mu had not revealed his identity or any other information. Even if the other party wanted to cause trouble for him, it would not be easy. There were more than 70,000 Inner Palace students, and if Chu Mu stayed in the sword tool pavilion to cultivate and did not come out, then finding him would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Of course, if the Thunder Fire Union used their power to search for him, they should be able to find Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu did not think that the leader of the Thunder Fire Union would make a big fuss over such a small matter. If he made a big fuss, then it meant that the other party was narrow-minded. How could such a person become the leader of one of the three unions? It would just be a joke. Without the slightest worry, Chu Mu turned and left to return to Astral 9. It seems that the elder of the Sword Tool Pavilion lives on the 4th floor. What terrifying strength, Lu Yin muttered to himself as he walked back. Chu Mu remembered the moment when he was unable to move. It made him realize that he was still not strong enough. He was still far from being strong enough. He was still too weak. Although he could defeat many swordsmen who had achieved the great success of Qi transformation with his initial Qi transformation cultivation, he was still not strong enough to defeat those who had achieved the perfection of Qi transformation, let alone those on the bronze sword ranking. Furthermore, above the Qi transformation realm was the Qi Si realm, the 9th transformation realm, and the astral realm. Above the astral realm were even more profound realms and even more powerful existences. Right now, he could only be considered to have taken the first step on the path of a swordsman. Although his foundation was much better than others, he still needed more time. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind, and all kinds of shock eventually turned into motivation for Chu Mu. After returning to Astral 9, Chu Mu went straight to his room on the 3rd floor and took out the Wind Cutter sword from his spatial bracelet. The Wind Cutter sword's scabbard was a gradual greenish-black color from one end to the other. It was covered with fish scale-like patterns, and it felt good when held in his hand. Chu Mu gripped the hilt with his right hand and pulled out the Wind Cutter sword. Suddenly, a cold aura burst forth, as if a gust of wind had appeared out of nowhere. The Wind Cutter sword's blade was 2 fingers wide, and its thickness and length were normal as well. Including the hilt, it was 103 centimeters long. Chu Mu's sword observation technique had already reached perfection, so he was able to grasp all the details of the Wind Cutter sword. This was where the difference came in. If a swordsman who had not reached perfection in the sword observation technique obtained the Wind Cutter sword, they would need to spend a considerable amount of time to familiarize themselves with the sword. Only then would they be able to wield it as they pleased. This was because all swords were different. Even if they were made of the same material and looked the same, it was like there were no two identical leaves in the world. However, Chu Mu was different. He had reached perfection in the sword observation technique, which allowed him to grasp all the details of a sword with just a few glances. Once he grasped it, he did not need to spend a lot of time to familiarize himself with it. He could wield it as if it were his own arm. 500,000 academic credit. Although it's a little high, the Wind Cutter sword is the best out of the 30 or so mid-tier swords. It can increase the power of a Wind-type sword art by 30% and a Wind-type low-tier ancient sword art by 15%. The increase is very obvious. His left hand's fingers were like a sword as he slowly slid them across the Wind Cutter sword's body. A trace of coldness spread through his fingers, and in that moment, Chu Mu felt as if Chu Mu had touched a cool breeze. I still need a mid-tier sword, regardless of whether it's a metal type or a cloud type sword. I'll keep the remaining blood evil stones and blood essences for now. It seems like I'll have to think of other ways to exchange for the academic credits for the other mid-tier sword. However, now that I have the Wind Cutter sword, there's no need to rush for the other mid-tier sword. Chu Mu thought to himself as he sheathed the Wind Cutter sword. In the remaining time, I'll focus on cultivating. I'll try to comprehend the concept of wind to 50% as soon as possible and cultivate the Wind Cutter sword art. After that, I'll participate in the Sword Arts King competition. After that, I'll return to the Chu family to comprehend the wind painting scroll and obtain the secret technique of the aspect of wind from it. Chu Mu had a clear plan for all of this, and he was also following this plan step by step. Under the implementation of this plan, his strength was also steadily increasing. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 238. Trash, it's already been a month, and you still can't find a single person. How dare you boast about how powerful you are? Qi Xiaofan slammed the table and cursed. Master Qi, the information you provided is too little. It's just a green-robed swordsman who's only at the beginning of the Qi transformation stage. It's too difficult for us to find him in the 10 inner academies. A black-clothed youth stood in front of Qi Xiaofan. Forget it. Qi Xiaofan knew that this was difficult, and he didn't dare to be too presumptuous, even though his brother, Qi Tianlei, was one of the leaders of the Thunder Fire Union. Damn you, if I find out who you are, I won't let you off so easily. Since it's fine, I'll take my leave. The black-clothed youth cupped his hands and bowed. Without waiting for Qi Xiaofan's reply, he took 2 steps back and left. Qi Xiaofan was furious, but he couldn't do anything. The black-clothed youth was stronger than him, and his position was only slightly lower. Although he was Qi Tianlei's younger brother, he hadn't been in the Thunder Fire Union for long. He had the cultivation of a Qi transformation stage Deshang, and his swordsmanship wasn't bad. He could be considered one of the more outstanding members of the Thunder Fire Union. However, because he hadn't been in the Thunder Fire Union for long, he hadn't made any significant contributions. Therefore, he held a position that wasn't too big, but it wasn't too small either. If Big Brother is willing to show up, he'll definitely be able to find that guy, Qi Xiaofan thought to himself. However, he didn't dare to disturb Qi Tianlei with this matter, or else he would definitely be beaten up. However, Qi Tianlei wasn't in the inner academy, so it would be difficult to find him. You better pray that I don't meet him, Qi Xiaofan thought to himself. Qi Xiaofan thought to himself. He had obtained the Wind Cutter sword, but he couldn't take it lying down. He had to do it. On the 4th floor of Astral Nine's 1300th sword tower, the dense spiritual energy suddenly trembled and a gust of wind blew in from the outside. It swirled around the dense spiritual energy and formed small cyclones. The small cyclones spun rapidly on the ground, on the wall, or in the air, making whistling sounds. Occasionally, there would be small cyclones that collided with each other. They would either explode with a popping sound or merge with each other to become bigger cyclones. Gradually, the number of small cyclones decreased until there was only one left. It had become a cyclone that was 2 meters tall and 1 meter in diameter. It was constantly emitting whistling sounds. This cyclone rushed towards Chu Mu, and its power seemed to want to tear Chu Mu to shreds. However, when the cyclone approached Chu Mu, it suddenly paused. It was as if it was being pulled by an invisible force. It started to slowly revolve around Chu Mu, just like a satellite orbiting Earth. From tyrannical to gentle, it was enough to make one's eyeballs pop out. In fact, even Chu Mu didn't know about the existence of the cyclone. He was completely immersed in comprehending the concept of wind, unable to extricate himself. Deepen, deepen, deepen! All sorts of mysteries regarding the concept of wind continuously appeared in his mind like a gust of wind blowing past. Suddenly, it was as if a thin membrane had been pierced through. All sorts of comprehensions regarding the concept of wind suddenly deepened. It was like trying to forcefully push open a door, but no matter how hard you tried, it wouldn't budge. It was as if you were about to suffocate, but in the end, you suddenly opened the door and saw the scenery outside and breathed in the fresh air. In that instant, the 2-meter-tall cyclone paused and turned into a gentle breeze that silently dissipated. The spiritual energy on the 4th floor also suddenly returned to normal. Chu Mu's eyes slowly opened, and a wisp of green blew across his eyes. He revealed a slight smile. My concept of wind has finally increased to 50%. Next, I can practice the gale shock swordsmanship. When he thought of this, Chu Mu couldn't help but feel excited. More than 2 months had passed since he'd exchanged for the gale shock swordsmanship. Every day, he'd tried his best to comprehend the concept of wind and the gale shock swordsmanship. After more than 2 months of hard work, he'd finally increased his concept of wind to 50%. As for the gale shock swordsmanship, Chu Mu had comprehended 70%. He could completely practice it now. As for the remaining 30% that he hadn't comprehended, Chu Mu felt that as long as he started to practice it, he would be able to solve it as his practice deepened. Ancient sword arts are different from other sword arts. They must have a concept as a foundation and at least 40% of it. Otherwise, they won't be able to practice it. Forcefully practicing it will backfire and cause harm to the body. Therefore, ancient sword arts also have a name, concept sword art. No matter if it's an introductory sword art, a low-level sword art, a mid-level sword art, a high-level sword art, or a transcendent sword art, they all follow the same step. First, practice the basic style. Only after practicing the basic style to the small success stage can one truly practice the later killer moves. It can be said that the killer moves are the fusion and extension of the basic styles. If there's only the basic style without the killer move, a sword art won't be complete, and its true power won't be displayed. On the other hand, if there's only the killer move without the basic style, it's like a rootless duckweed. Without a prelude and a foundation, one won't be able to practice it successfully. The basic style and the killer move complement each other. Neither of them can be missing. However, ancient sword arts are different. Ancient sword arts don't have the so-called basic style or killer move. In just a few short moves, all of them have extraordinary power. It's very terrifying. It's the interpretation and application of the concept power. There are a total of 3 moves in the startling wind sword art, namely stirring wind, raging wind, and raging wind. I have already comprehended stirring wind, so I should be able to master it in a few days. Raging wind is also more or less comprehended, so I should be able to master it in a short period of time. As for the last move, raging wind, it is more profound, so I won't be able to master it in a short time. Getting up, he quickly went downstairs to the first floor. Pulling out the wind cutter sword, Chu Mu stood still. All kinds of shocking wind sword art naturally flowed through his mind. Immediately, he started to practice and swung his sword. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind whistling. Gusts of wind were generated under the sword, blowing forward along with the sword. Chu Mu suddenly withdrew his sword and frowned. He couldn't find the feeling of that sword move. Even though he had already comprehended rippling wind, he was still unable to find the correct method to practice it in a short period of time. Shocking wind is the beginning of the shocking wind sword art. It can be a sword move alone, or it can be the prelude to the next move, shocking wind. The power of the first 3 moves is weaker. After thinking for a few breaths, Chu Mu swung his sword again. This time, the wind was generated under the sword, and the whistling of the wind was even stronger. But again, Chu Mu couldn't find the feeling. He couldn't tell what it was, but he felt that it shouldn't be like this. This time, he thought for a full 15 minutes. Ancient sword arts are also called concept sword arts. One's concept has to reach a certain level before they can practice it. In that case, does the execution of ancient sword arts have to be actively integrated with the concept and activated with the concept? Thinking of this, Chu Mu's eyes couldn't help but light up. He felt that it was possible. Comprehending it was one thing. After all, it was only in theory. The ancient sword arts didn't explain how to practice and so on. Everything had to be figured out by oneself. This time, Chu Mu didn't use the Sky Origin Sword Chi. He directly integrated 50% of the concept of wind into the sword in his hand. The essence of shocking wind flowed through his mind. All of a sudden, there seemed to be gusts of wind blowing in the surroundings. There was a clear sound, but Chu Mu's hair didn't move at all. He swung his sword, and a whistling sound was heard. It was as if a strong wind was blowing, and the sword moved with the wind. Shocking wind. This sword move was extremely fast. It was shocking when it was still. What was strange was that there was a whistling sound, but there was no real wind. This feeling was very strange, and people who didn't know what was going on would feel their hair stand on end. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu looked at the dissipating sword shadow in front of him and smiled. Startling wind movement, startling wind movement. Chu Mu thought to himself. It was exactly this feeling. A single sword strike would bring forth a startling wind in all directions. I finally found the right way to practice. However, it's still not enough. I still need to practice to truly master it. Chu Mu performed sword moves after sword moves, and practiced sword moves after sword moves. It didn't take long for him to stop practicing. This was because whether it was practicing or performing the ancient sword arts, one had to integrate enough concept into it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective. However, using the concept would consume one's mental energy. Maybe one wouldn't feel any exhaustion after 1 or 2 or 3 times, but after many times, one would feel tired. With Chu Mu's powerful soul power, his mental energy was many times more than ordinary swordsmen. This allowed him to perform more concepts, but it wasn't limitless. After performing hundreds of times, Chu Mu finally felt a little tired. Time flew by like a stream of water, never to return. On the 3rd day of practicing the shocking wind swordsmanship, Chu Mu finally practiced the shocking wind to small accomplishment. On the 10th day, he practiced the shocking wind to Deshang, and he could perform it as he wished. On the 20th day, he practiced the ardent wind to entry level. On the 30th day, he practiced the ardent wind to small accomplishment. On the 50th day, he practiced the ardent wind to Deshang. After that, Chu Mu began to practice the shocking wind fury. Compared to the shocking wind and ardent wind, the shocking wind fury was obviously more profound and difficult to practice. It took Chu Mu 20 days to practice the shocking wind fury to entry level, and another 40 days to practice it to small accomplishment. During this time, the shocking wind and ardent wind had also improved. The shocking wind was practiced to perfection, and the ardent wind was not far from perfection. His sword chi had also improved during this time, and finally reached the peak of the chi transformation level. He was only one step away from breaking through to small accomplishment. On the 4th floor of the Earth-level sword tower, Chu Mu sat cross-legged on a futon, and the surrounding spiritual chi kept surging. Chu Mu held a mid-grade spirit stone in his right hand, and pure spiritual chi kept flowing into his palm and meridians. As he circulated it, it was transformed by the Tianyuan sword chi. With these two things at the same time, the Tianyuan sword chi in Chu Mu's body had accumulated to a limit. If it continued to accumulate, he would break through the limit and enter the next level. Suddenly, Chu Mu's body shook slightly, and a sound like a bubble bursting was heard. A large amount of spiritual chi rushed into his body. I finally broke through to small accomplishment of chi transformation. My overall strength has increased by at least 30%. Chu Mu stopped moving and opened his eyes. His eyes were so clear that one could see the bottom. A smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he muttered to himself. And at this time, it was time for the Sword Art is the King competition to begin. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 239. The Triennial Sword Art is the King competition was highly valued by the Sword Mansion. In the world of swordsmen, the Sword Chi realm was only the foundation. The Chi transformation realm was the real door of swordsmanship. In the Sword Chi realm, the importance of basic sword techniques was not clear. This was because the introductory sword techniques and low-level sword techniques were more powerful than basic sword technique. However, once one broke through to the Chi transformation realm, the importance of basic sword techniques would become obvious. Swordsmen in the Chi transformation realm were qualified to practice ancient sword technique. There were 3 indispensable conditions to practice ancient sword techniques: innate sword chi, intent realm, and basic sword technique attainment. However, relatively speaking, intent realm was the most important and strict requirement. If one did not have enough intent realm to practice ancient sword techniques, they would only suffer from backlash. If one's sword chi cultivation was not high enough, they would not be able to practice it even if they wanted to. As for basic sword technique, it was actually the most uncertain one. Many people believed that to practice ancient sword techniques, one would only be able to master basic sword techniques after reaching a certain level. If one's basic sword technique attainment was not high enough, it would be very difficult to practice ancient sword technique. It would also be difficult to fully unleash the power of the ancient sword technique. However, it was still impossible to explain the principles behind it. In short, it had been proven that it would be more beneficial to practice ancient sword techniques with profound basic sword technique attainment as the foundation. Moreover, the battles in the chi transformation realm were different from those in the sword chi realm. The battles in the sword chi realm were usually flashy and grand. However, after entering the chi transformation realm, especially after practicing ancient sword techniques, one would pay more attention to power and not flashy visual effects. Instead, one would pay more attention to the essence. As a result, basic sword technique attainment became more important. Therefore, when there was still a month before the Sword Art is the King competition, the Sword Mansion had already made all the preparations and mobilized everyone. When I entered the inner mansion, the Sword Art is the King competition ended, so I couldn't participate. It's a pity, but I must participate this time, Liang Haishan said excitedly. Even if I can't get into the top 1,000 in the end, my swordsmanship attainments will definitely be improved. Chumu nodded. Sparring with a swordsmanship expert would greatly improve one's understanding of swordsmanship. This was also one of the reasons why Chumu participated in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Especially for Liang Haishan, who had just been enlightened by Chumu's guidance, he needed to consolidate and improve through actual combat. The two of them walked side by side towards the location where Astral Nine's Sword is the King tournament would be held. There were 10 academies in the inner house, and there were more than 70,000 students in total. Even if not all of them participated in the Sword Art King tournament, there were at least 50,000 participants. There were simply too many people. No matter what, it was impossible to get all 50,000 people onto the arena. Therefore, before the real swordsmanship king competition began, there would be an elimination round. Liang Haishan had told Chumu about this. From what I understand, the elimination round is divided into 3 stages, which are also known as the 3 stages of swordsmanship. Liang Haishan spoke frankly, and it was obvious that he had worked hard in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Swordsmanship is unconventional. We swordsmen's swordsmanship emphasizes speed, accuracy, stability, and ruthlessness. Furthermore, the attack power of the sword is extremely strong. Therefore, the 3 stages of swordsmanship mainly target these few aspects of swordsmanship. Chumu fell into deep thought. In summary, the 3 stages of swordsmanship mainly test one's defense, swordsmanship, and attack. Only by passing all 3 stages will one be qualified to participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Otherwise, one will only be a spectator. Liang Haishan's voice was filled with anticipation and excitement. In the past, I wouldn't have had the confidence to pass the 3 stages, but after receiving your guidance in the Blood Demon realm, my swordsmanship has improved significantly. Now, I'm confident that I can pass the 3 stages and participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. The 3 stages of swordsmanship tournament were held in the various academies to prevent too many people from complicating matters. Besides Chu Mu and Liang Haishan, there was a constant stream of people coming from afar. They were all talking about the King of Swordsmanship tournament. It was obvious that the triennial King of Swordsmanship tournament held by the Sword Manor was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. The 3 stages of swordsmanship tournament were held in a very large plaza in Astral 9. When Chu Mu and Liang Haishan arrived, there were already thousands of people gathered there. Chu Mu also noticed that there were many houses in the center of the plaza, all of them lined up side by side. That's where the 3 stages of swordsmanship tournament are held, Liang Haishan said as he pointed at the neatly arranged houses. Chu Mu was immediately puzzled. These houses looked very simple from the outside, and there was nothing special about them. Normally, no one would take a second look at them. However, such an ordinary place was where the 3 stages of the King of Swordsmanship tournament were held? Chu Mu was even more curious now. How exactly did the tournament work? Chu Mu looked around carefully as if he wanted to figure it out. He immediately discovered that there were a total of 20 neatly arranged houses. These 20 houses were arranged in a row of 10, so there were 2 rows in total. The 2 rows were about 100 meters apart from each other, and the doors of the houses were all open. However, it was pitch black inside, and Lu Yin couldn't see anything at first glance. About 100 meters away from the back of the house, in a straight line with the house, there were 10 wooden shelves. There seemed to be some swords on them. More students arrived, and they were all discussing the tournament. How does the King of Swordsmanship tournament work? Chu Mu couldn't understand, so he asked. I'm not too sure either. Liang Haishan smiled. I just know that these houses are related to the 3 stages of swordsmanship tournament. Once you pass the 3 stages, you'll be qualified to participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. After that, each academy will hold a preliminary round for the tournament. It's said that only the top 100 students will be qualified to participate in the finals of the tournament. Only the top 100 students in the finals will receive rewards from the Sword Manor. It's said that the top 10 will receive even better rewards, especially the top 3. Chu Mu immediately understood what was going on. In the last King of Swordsmanship tournament, Senior Situko was ranked 93rd in Astral 9, and he was ranked 923rd in the finals, Liang Haishan said. Chu Mu nodded. He couldn't help but think of Huang Shaoan, who had ranked higher than Situko. He then thought of Han Ruoshuan Zhugeming, who had probably ranked higher than Situko as well. Perhaps the people on the bronze sword ranking can all enter the top 100 of the Sword Technique King competition. Chu Mu thought to himself. Chu Mu, your swordsmanship is amazing. I'm sure that you'll be able to rank in the top 1,000, but it's hard to say if you'll rank in the top 100. Liang Haishan continued. That's because the top 100 spots are all occupied by those on the bronze sword rankings. It's said that this has been the case for the past 100 years. No student who isn't on the bronze sword rankings has ever ranked in the top 100 of the tournament. So that's how it is. Chu Mu couldn't help but smile. Nothing is absolute in this world. Maybe something that hasn't happened in the past 100 years will happen this time. That's true, but it'll be very difficult. Liang Haishan laughed. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. Look, that's senior sister Han Ruoshua. I heard that she ranked 5th in the last King of Swordsmanship tournament and 59th in the inner courtyard. That's senior brother Zhu Tianzhao. I remember that he ranked 4th in the last King of Swordsmanship tournament and 52nd in the inner courtyard. I see senior brother Huang Buju. He ranked 3rd in the last King of Swordsmanship tournament and 47th in the inner courtyard. He's ranked even higher than senior sister Han and senior brother Zhu. With the arrival of these people, the students were all very excited. Liang Haishan was also very excited. He stood on his tiptoes and stretched his neck to look around, but because he was in the middle of the crowd, all he could see were heads. He could only stand there with some regret. Who ranked in the top 100 of the King of Swordsmanship tournament last year? Chu Mu asked. In his eyes, only the top 100 of the entire inner courtyard were worthy of his attention. Chu Mu wasn't interested in the rest. You've asked the right person. Since he couldn't see them, Liang Haishan decided to divert his attention and explain to Chu Mu. In the last King of Swordsmanship tournament, there were 7 students who ranked in the top 100 of the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Senior brother Yang Jian, We ranked 7th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 88th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 89th in the Bronze Sword tournament. Senior brother Tang Xiaoba, we ranked 6th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 81st in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 78th in the Bronze Sword tournament. Senior sister Han Ruoxue, you've met her before. We ranked 5th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 59th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 53rd in the Bronze Sword tournament. Senior brother Zhu Tianzhao, he's the current leader of the Proud Sword Gang. We ranked 4th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 52nd in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 45th in the Bronze Sword tournament. I heard that senior brother Zhu is very proud. You've offended the Proud Sword Gang, so be careful. Senior brother Huang Buju, we ranked 3rd in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 47th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 43rd in the Bronze Sword tournament. Senior sister Tang Hairuo, we ranked 2nd in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 41st in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 39th in the Bronze Sword tournament. Senior brother Zhu Gaming, we ranked 1st in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, 35th in the King of Swordsmanship tournament, and 35th in the Bronze Sword tournament. All 7 of them have Qi Perfection Realm Sword Qi, and they've also practiced ancient sword arts. It's said that they've all reached more than 50% sword Qi, and some of them have even reached 60% sword Qi. They're very scary. Liang Haishan concluded, "Oh right, the rankings of each school are not really a competition. They're based on the overall ranking." Chu Mu listened in silence. After he finished listening, he repeated the names of the 7 people in his mind. He knew that he would have to fight against some of them. When that time came, he would have to decide who was better. At this time, a majestic aura spread out, like the water of the sea, sweeping past. Under this vast aura, the students who were discussing animatedly shuddered and subconsciously shut their mouth. The square, which had been as noisy and lively as a market, suddenly quieted down and became silent. Only the faint sound of breathing could be heard. Then, a majestic voice resounded through the sky, among the 10 inner schools, who dares to claim to be the king of swordsmanship. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 240. The words, "Who dares to claim the title of King of Swordsmanship among the 10 academies of the Inner Academy?" immediately stirred the hearts of the thousands of students in Astral 9. They almost couldn't contain their excitement and wanted to immediately draw their swords, defeat everyone, and claim the title of King of Swordsmanship. Only a small number of people were not affected by the voice and remained calm. Chu Mu was one of them. Liang Haishan, who was beside him, was so excited that his face was flushed red. He clenched his fists and his breathing became rapid. After a long time, Liang Haishan finally calmed down. That voice just now should have been the head of our academy. The academy's King of Swordsmanship tournament is personally hosted by the head, but I wonder where the head is? The first test, defense, begin. The voice rang out once again. After the voice fell, the students were stunned for a moment. Then, 10 people took the lead and quickly rushed into the 10 rooms. In a flash, they rushed into the 10 rooms. After that, there was no sound, and only a group of people at the back were left staring. Only those who had participated in the tournament knew what was going on inside. What's going on? Why is there no movement at all? Someone couldn't help but mutter in confusion, but no one answered. After about a minute, the 10 students rushed out from another door of the room. Of the 10, 3 looked exactly the same as when they had entered, while the other 7 had some traces on their clothes that seemed to be powder. The 3 who were unharmed quickly rushed to the last row of rooms, while the other 7 walked back to the crowd dejectedly. Immediately, a second batch of 10 people rushed out and entered the 10 houses in the front row. What's going on? Those who didn't understand looked at each other in confusion. It was as if their hearts were being scratched by a cat's paw. Finally, someone in the know revealed the truth. There are 3 tests in swordsmanship. The first test is defense. After entering the 10 rooms, you will be attacked from all directions. As long as your swordsmanship is good enough, you can completely block those attacks. What if I can't block them? Someone asked. It's simple. Just like them, there will be traces of attacks on your body. Of course, you won't be hurt, but you will be eliminated and have no chance to participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Chu Mu suddenly understood. At this time, the second batch of 10 students also came out. It was slightly better than the first batch. Only 4 people were eliminated, and 6 people entered the second round. At the same time, the first batch of people to enter the second round of the examination also left the room. 2 of them came out from the side door, and 1 came out from the back. The man who came out from the back strode forward, while the other 2 walked back to the crowd dejectedly. Chu Mu saw that the person who came out of the back door ran another 100 meters or so. He grabbed a sword from the wooden rack and stabbed it out. Sword light flashed. Suddenly, it was as if a formless membrane had been pierced through in front of him. That person immediately placed the sword in his hand on the wooden rack and charged forward in a flash. He immediately disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, causing Chu Mu to be shocked. Narrowing his eyes, there was a trace of light in his eyes. Chu Mu looked for a long time before he realized that there was a seal. However, the seal was very mysterious. It was difficult to distinguish between real and fake. It looked as if it was transparent, and there was no obstruction. However, there was a mystery in it that made it look real. Oh my God, what is going on? Who can explain it to me? If the first trial is a test of sword defense, then the second trial is a test of sword technique. In the room of the second trial, there are many bubbles. You have to instantly strike with your sword and shatter the glowing bubbles within 1 breath of time without any obstruction. Only then will the door of the second trial automatically open. Everyone has 3 chances to attack. If you can't reach the target after 3 times, you will be eliminated and can only come out from the side door. The third test is to test sword attack. Do you see that? Over there, it looks like there is nothing there. It looks very real, but in fact, it is a seal that separates this place. You have to use the sword on the wooden rack to break the seal before you can enter. Everyone only has 3 chances to use their sword. If you can't break the seal after 3 times, you will be eliminated. Many people, including Chu Mu, suddenly had an enlightened look. If no one else had said it, they wouldn't have known where the mystery lay. The earlier they understood, the earlier they could be prepared. They wouldn't be flustered. Rookies, let me tell you something else. There are 2 ways to pass the first test. The old student seemed to be addicted to talking. He continued to show off. The first test is to test sword defense. Once you enter the room, you will immediately be attacked. The first way to pass is to stand where you are and use your sword to block attacks from all directions. As long as you persist for 60 breaths of time without being hit, the attacks will stop and you pass. The second method is to take the initiative. Once you enter the room, you will immediately move forward and block attacks while rushing out from the other side. As long as you are not hit, you will pass the first test. Of course, if you are not confident, it is best to obediently choose the first method. As long as you rush out of the second method, the attacks from all directions will intensify and become even more ferocious. While the old student was explaining, over 100 people had already attempted the first test. However, it seemed that the probability of passing was not high. Those who passed didn't dare to show any excitement and immediately went to the next stage. Those who didn't pass looked dejected and returned to the crowd with some unwillingness. Let me tell you something else. Don't try to get lucky. The third test is to test your swordsmanship, so you are not allowed to use any sword techniques other than the basic ones. You are also not allowed to use any movement technique. Most importantly, your sword chi and artistic conception are prohibited. There were more than 7,000 students in Astral 9, and almost all of them were present. Every single one of them wanted to challenge the 3 trials of swordsmanship. Once they passed the trials, they would be able to participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. There were more than 7,000 people to challenge, and 10 of them formed a batch, which meant that there were more than 700 batches. If one batch took 1 minute, then more than 700 batches would take more than 700 minutes, which meant that they would have to wait around 12 hours. Look, it's Senior Zhu Tianzhao. He's going to challenge the 3 tests. What's there to be surprised about? Senior Zhu and the others are just going through the motions. Otherwise, with their swordsmanship, they wouldn't even need to challenge the 3 tests. They could directly enter the preliminaries. No, they could directly enter the finals. That's true. As expected of Senior Zhu, he actually took 5 breaths to pass the first test. Indeed, for a swordsman of Zhu Tianzhao's level, the 3 tests posed no pressure at all. He entered the room and rushed out in the blink of an eye to enter the next test. For the final seal, Zhu Tianzhao grabbed a sword from a wooden rack and casually waved it, tearing a hole in the wall. He then placed the sword down and entered. Apart from Zhu Tianzhao, some other people also seemed to have an easy time passing the 3 tests. They easily passed the tests without any pressure, which made many people envious. Chumu, I'll go first. See you in the preliminaries, Liang Haishan said. He was confident that he could pass the 3 tests. See you in the preliminaries, Chumu said. Liang Haishan and the other 9 students rushed out at the same time. After a few breaths, they directly entered the room. After about 60 breaths, which was about 1 minute, 10 people appeared. 5 of them walked back to the crowd dejectedly, while the other 5 quickly went to the next test. Liang Haishan was among them. Soon, 2 of the 5 people came out from the side door, while the other 3 came out from the back door. They quickly rushed to the seal 100 meters away. Liang Haishan was also one of the 3. Chu Mu stared at Liang Haishan. It was the 3rd test. Liang Haishan grabbed an unsharpened sword from the wooden rack and suddenly thrust it out. However, the sword bounced back, and the seal only slightly shook before it was torn apart. Liang Haishan's expression changed slightly. He let out a breath and calmed himself down. His heartbeat also became less rapid. Holding the unsharpened sword tightly, Liang Haishan's eyes became sharp. He could feel that the seal was not strong. If he used a little bit of Xiantian sword qi, he could easily break it. But the problem was that the 3 tests absolutely prohibited sword qi and artistic conception. It was a test of pure sword skills. Unless he didn't want to participate in the Sword King competition, he couldn't use any sword qi or artistic conception. Even the slightest use would be detected and eliminated. Liang Haishan gathered his strength and concentrated. He knew that he still had 2 chances. If he couldn't break the seal in the remaining 2 chances, then he wouldn't have any hope in this Sword King competition. Exhaling, he waved his sword. The sword broke through the air and made a sharp sound. In an instant, it seemed as if a sword light flashed. With a ripping sound, a hole appeared under the seal. It was as if a piece of cloth was torn apart. Liang Haishan quickly put the unsharpened sword on the wooden rack. His figure flashed and squeezed in the moment when the seal closed. It was so close that he couldn't pass. Rookies, you must remember that you must go in immediately after breaking the seal. Otherwise, the seal will close again very quickly. The senior commentator laughed and said in a joking tone, "Of course, you must put the sword back before you enter. Otherwise, even if you successfully enter the seal, you will be judged as a failure and eliminated." Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Putting down the sword and entering the seal seemed to be very simple, but the time was very short. It had to be fast enough. This was also a test, an informal and invisible test. They didn't expect that there would be so many things involved in the knockout round of the King of Swords competition. If it weren't for the senior students' explanation, these students who had never participated in the King of Swords competition would be caught off guard even if they had done some research before. Once they were caught off guard, the final result was very likely to be eliminated. This kind of elimination was not because of the lack of sword skills, but because of the problem of mentality. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 241. Batch after batch of students challenged the 3 swordsmanship tests. Some succeeded while others failed. They dared not be complacent if they succeeded, but they could not avoid being disappointed if they failed. The top 7 from the previous batch had all challenged the 3 tests and entered the forbidden area. Another batch appeared, and Chu Mu was among them. It's senior brother Zhong Liang. He's about to start his challenge. In the previous batch, senior brother Zhong was ranked 10th in the academy, and was ranked 153rd on the king ranking list. Other than senior brother Zhong, the other 9 are probably nothing special. Senior brother Zhong will definitely be the first to pass the 3 tests. All sorts of discussions rang out. Chu Mu glanced at the person next to him. He was also wearing a cyan-colored robe and looked to be around 24 or 25 years old. His face was cold, but there was a flash of pride in his eyes. This meant that his temperament wasn't as calm as he looked on the surface. The test began. Chu Mu and the other 10 people flew out and rushed into the room in the blink of an eye. As soon as he entered the room, Chu Mu felt a very strange feeling. There was not the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy in the room, and this feeling made him know that the innate sword qi in his dantian seemed to be imprisoned. It was motionless, and even his soul seemed to be affected. However, it was not because his soul was affected, but because of some kind of seal. His own artistic conception was temporarily isolated, and he could not use it. In this way, in this room, he could only rely on his body and his swordsmanship. As soon as he entered the room, in addition to this strange feeling, Chu Mu saw 3 sharp sword light flying in front of him. He unsheathed his wind-cutter sword and shattered the 3 sword light with one strike. Chu Mu's footsteps didn't stop as he quickly charged forward. There was no light in the room, and it was very dark. Even with the perfect vision sword, Chu Mu could not see clearly. He could only see some vague outlines. This did not pose any hindrance to Chu Mu. 7 or 8 sword light came from the front, the sides, and the back. Each of them was very sharp, and it was hard to imagine that he would not be injured by these sword light. Chu Mu would never try it. Even if he wanted to, it would not be under such circumstances. He casually swung his sword, and the 7 or 8 sword light were all shattered. The first stage of the 3 stages of swordsmanship tested the defense of the sword, but defense did not mean that one could block the attack foolishly. Sometimes attacking was also a good defense, just like now. Although Chu Mu didn't have Xiantian sword qi, nor did he use any martial arts or footwork, his speed was still very fast, and he dashed forward in a straight line. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Dozens of sword light shot toward Chu Mu from all directions. It was as if they wanted to turn him into a beehive. At first there were only 3, then 8, and now there are 15. Chu Mu thought to himself as he continued to walk forward. With a light flick of his wind-cutter sword, the incomparably sharp tip of the sword instantly shattered all 15 sword light. It seems like it is just as that person said. If I move forward by myself, I will receive even more powerful attack. At this time, Chu Mu could already see the exit on the other side. His speed suddenly increased, and at the same time, 25 sword light shot out from nowhere, intertwining with each other as if they wanted to tear Chu Mu into pieces. Chu Mu's expression did not change, but his eyes were covered with a faint layer of light, as cold as water. No matter which angle the sword light came from, none of them could escape his senses. Thus, he swung his sword, and the sharp tip of the wind-cutter sword instantly shattered the 25 sword light. The 25 sword light shattered at the same time, and turned into bright lights that were annihilated. At this time, Chu Mu had already dashed to the exit, and he took a step forward. It seems like the intensity of the attacks in the first stage is adjusted according to the speed of the person who enters. Chumu thought to himself. Other than him, there seemed to be no one else. Sure enough, at the moment he rushed out, he heard some exclamations. In less than 5 breaths of time, how is this possible? And it's not Senior Brother Zhong, but someone I've never seen before. He looks so young. I know him. His name is Chumu. He's a new student. What? The Chumu who got 310,000 credits in the Blood Demon realm? Is his swordsmanship comparable to Senior Brother Zhu's? That's impossible. Although he passed the first stage very quickly, it only means that his swordsmanship is good, and his speed is also very fast. After all, it's not particularly difficult to pass the first stage. There was a distance of 100 meters between the first stage and the second stage. Chumu kept moving forward at a constant speed. After about 6 breaths of time, when Chumu was about to enter the second stage, the second person rushed out of the house. How is this possible? I'm not the first one. Zhong Liang was shocked and his face was full of surprise. Originally, he thought that with his attainments in swordsmanship, although not comparable to Zhu Tianzhao's and the others, he was definitely the strongest among the 10 people in the same batch, and even stronger than many others. Therefore, he felt that it was already very good for him to be able to pass the first stage within 10 breaths of time. It was better than the last time, which showed that he had made progress. Unexpectedly, there was someone who passed the first stage 1 step ahead of him. No, it was several breaths of time before he passed the first stage. It was unbelievable. At this moment, Zhong Liang suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He hurriedly sped up. No matter what, Zhong Liang had to pass the second stage before the other person. The first stage is a test of defense, but there are some particularly flexible people who can pass it very quickly. They don't rely on profound swordsmanship. Zhong Liang said to himself, the second stage is the real test of swordsmanship. This time, I'll definitely pass it faster than you. With a whoosh, Zhong Liang rushed into the house of the second stage. The house of the second stage was also dark. Chu Mu's innate sword qi and essence were still suppressed, unable to move. Different from the first stage, after entering the second stage, he did not receive any attack. In the house, white bubbles the size of duck eggs suddenly appeared one after another. They were very clear in the darkness. The distribution of the bubbles was irregular. There might be more on the left and less on the right. It could also be that the arrangement of the bubbles was not uniform. The bubbles could be close to each other, or they could be very far apart. Suddenly, the bubbles lit up one after another. Chu Mu immediately drew his sword light. The wind-cutter sword left 7 faint sword lights in the darkness and then disappeared. The 7 bubbles that lit up one after another were destroyed by Chu Mu before their light dimmed. The other bubbles all disappeared in an instant. With a creak, the door on the opposite side opened automatically, and a ray of light shone in. Chu Mu flashed and rushed out of the room. The moment Chu Mu rushed out of the room and rushed towards the seal 100 meters away, Zhong Liang entered the second stage. Therefore, Zhong Liang did not see Chu Mu pass the second stage. Otherwise, he did not know what kind of shock he would receive. Look, it's that guy. He passed again. This time, it took him less than 5 breaths. The remaining students suddenly exclaimed, "It's incredible! If passing the first stage can be explained, then passing the second stage so quickly? You should know that compared to the first stage, the second stage's assessment of swordsmanship is much clearer. So, this guy's swordsmanship attainment is very high. If this guy's swordsmanship attainment is really high, then this time, there will be a good show to watch." All kinds of discussions sounded, but because it was too far away, Chu Mu did not hear them. He also did not bother to pay attention to them. He quickly rushed over 100 meters and arrived in front of the seal. The wooden shelf was 2 meters high, and there were 10 unsharpened swords hanging on it. They should belong to the low-grade swords class. However, these 10 unsharpened low-grade swords were not divided into any elements. There was no fire or wind element, so they could be considered as non-elemental swords. The only difference was their appearance. One of them was a normal sword, while the other 9 were either short swords, longer swords, medium swords, thinner swords, narrower swords, larger swords, or heavier swords. They were all different from each other. After all, some swordsmen were used to using non-standard swords, so when they used standard swords, it was difficult for them to exert the power of their swordsmanship. This was because they had not reached the realm where everything could be used as a sword. In fact, until now it was only a legend. Chu Mu naturally used a normal sword. He grabbed the sword with one hand, and the sword's length and weight all appeared in his mind. Looking in front of him, if he didn't already know, Chu Mu wouldn't have been able to confirm that there was a seal here. This seal was so real that it seemed to have merged with the surrounding environment, causing one to have a visual illusion. Immediately, Chu Mu swung his sword. This sword did not have the slightest sword light. After swinging it, there was no obstruction at all, and there was no sound of cloth tearing. However, only Chu Mu himself knew that the moment the sword was swung, the sword came into contact with an invisible force. This force wanted to block his sword, but Chu Mu's swordsmanship attainment was extremely high. This force was easily defeated by Chu Mu's sword, and the seal was immediately torn apart. Chu Mu casually threw the sword back on the wooden shelf, and then he took a step forward. His whole body seemed to be swallowed up and disappeared. At this moment, Zhong Liang had just passed the second stage. He rushed out of the room and took a quick look. There was no one there. Humph, as expected, that guy passed the first stage by luck. The second stage is the real test of swordsmanship. He won't be able to pass it so easily. In fact, if Zhong Liang knew that the guy he was talking about had not only passed the second stage before him, but had also passed the third stage and entered the seal, who knew how shocked he would be. However, this was even more interesting. When he passed the third stage and entered the seal, how would he feel if he suddenly realized that the person who was supposed to appear after him, or even as an audience, had entered before him? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 242. We should split the top 10 from the previous tournament and assign them to different groups. That way, we can prevent them from fighting each other and getting eliminated. I suggest we assign the remaining students as follows. Based on their performance in the 3 stages, this student's swordsmanship is pretty good. He'll be assigned to this group. I think this student called Lei Hao's swordsmanship is pretty good. He's probably in the top 100 of our academy. He'll be assigned to this group. This student called Chu Mu's swordsmanship isn't bad either. He has a good chance of getting into the top 100. This Chu Mu passed the 3 stages with ease. I think he'll be able to get into the top 100 of our academy. He might even be able to get into the top 10. And this Zhang Xian, what a terrifying elimination rate. When the crowd found out the number of people who had passed the 3 stages, they couldn't help but be shocked. Astral 9 had more than 7,000 students who had passed the 3 stages, but only a little over 1,000 had passed. Taking everything into account, there were exactly 1,600 students. In other words, the elimination rate was as high as 70 to 80%, and only a little over 20% had passed. After breaking through the seal on the 3rd stage of the 3 stages of swordsmanship, there was also a huge open space. However, there were 10 arenas in the open space, each of which was 5 meters wide and 5 meters long. The arenas were divided into 2 rows with 5 arenas in each row. Each arena was about 5 meters apart, and the arenas were fixed within a certain range. When Chu Mu broke through the restriction and entered, there were already over 1,000 people gathered around the 10 stages. They were all students that had passed the 3 stages of the sword technique. An old man with a sword on his back stood on each arena. The old man's eyes were closed as he rested, and he didn't move at all. He looked like a statue, but the aura he exuded was enough to shock anyone who looked at him. In addition, there were 2 wooden racks next to each arena. Many unsharpened swords hung from the racks, and they were all different in size, shape, and weight. The students who had failed the 3 stages had been eliminated, and they had entered as spectators. They stood at least 50 meters away from the arenas and circled around them. As the preliminary round of the King of Swordsmanship tournament, there was no need to pay too much attention to it. Next, it was time to split them into groups. There were exactly 1,600 students who had passed the 3 tests. It was not an easy task to select 100 from these 1,600 students to participate in the finals of the Sword Art is the King competition. Therefore, according to past practice, these 1,600 people were divided into 10 groups, and each group had exactly 160 people, which corresponded to the 10 sword battle arenas. Everyone was surprised to find that Zhuge Ming and Han Ruoxue, who had been ranked in the top 10 in the academy last year, had coincidentally been separated and assigned to different groups. Furthermore, the final 100 places for the finals had been split up. After an average calculation, each group had 10 places. Are you stupid? This must be a deliberate allocation. Otherwise, if 2 of them are in the same group, they might encounter each other. At that time, one of them might be eliminated and unable to participate in the finals. How unfair would that be? Suddenly, someone revealed a look of realization. Let me tell you, rookies, the allocation of the 10 groups is actually very fair. When splitting the groups, the Academy's elders and the others will allocate them according to the individual's performance in the 3 stages of swordsmanship. They will try their best to avoid any unexpected situations and ensure that the members of each group have an average level of swordsmanship. Chu-Mu also understood. With such an allocation, there would be no possibility of a group having many students with high attainments in swordsmanship, and a group having students with low attainments in swordsmanship. Otherwise, it was very likely that the final 10 places in one group would be generally strong, while the other group's 10 places would be average. They might not even be able to compare to the students who had been eliminated in the stronger group, and that would be a joke. The final allocation result was that Liang Haishan was assigned to the 7th group, and Chu-Mu was assigned to the 10th group. Very coincidentally, the one who was assigned to the 10th group was the 10th place, Zhong Liang. It had to be said that after Zhong Liang broke the seal and passed the 3rd stage, he looked around. However, because there were too many people, he did not see Chu-Mu. In addition to his previous thoughts, he subconsciously felt that when he passed the 3rd stage, Chu-Mu was very likely still in the 2nd stage, or had just passed the 2nd stage. Therefore, when he saw Chu-Mu later, Zhong Liang only took a few more glances at him with a hint of contempt in his eyes. He did not pay too much attention to him. If he knew the truth, it was unknown if he would still have such an attitude. The Academy's preliminary round was just a necessary formality, so there was no need to pay attention to ostentation. Once the groups were completed, the swordsmanship competition began under the watchful eyes of the other students. The 10 elders in the arena were the referees of the 10 groups, corresponding to the 10 arenas. They all had a list of their group members in their hands. Because the 10 arenas were fixed in a circle, the spectating students could easily see the competition on the arenas. The first match of the first round, He Chiu against Hong Lai, the first group's referee announced loudly. The first match of the first round, the referees of each group began to announce the names of the participants in the first match of the first round. The first match of the first round, Lei Hao against Zhang Huanglong, the 10th group's referee announced. Suddenly, 2 figures each grabbed an unsharpened sword from the wooden rack and jumped onto the arena. Their expressions changed slightly, but quickly returned to normal. Zhang Huanglong was ranked 75th in the academy last year, and ranked 768th overall. After 3 years of cultivation, his swordsmanship must be more profound than it was 3 years ago. This Lei Hao entered the inner house 2 years ago, and this is his first time participating in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. However, I saw that he passed the 3 stages without much difficulty. Perhaps he can fight Zhang Huanglong. Of course, the final winner will be Zhang Huanglong. As the crowd discussed in low voices, the battle between Lei Hao and Zhang Huanglong began. A battle of pure swordsmanship did not look that flashy, but each strike was an interpretation of one's strength. Lei Hao's figure was vigorous, his speed was fast, and his reflexes were agile. He gave off the feeling of a cheetah. His basic sword arts also had its own unique style. Every sword strike had a powerful explosive force and extraordinary speed. He took the direct and concise route. Zhang Huanglong's style was different. He gave people the impression that his speed and strength were not as good as Lei Hao's, but he seemed to be able to block Lei Hao's sword and counterattack. Chu Mu stared at Zhang Huanglong's sword and found that Zhang Huanglong's sword would twist slightly when blocking Lei Hao's sword. He used a strange method to remove the huge force from Lei Hao's sword and used it to assist his own counterattack. Zhang Huanglong's swordsmanship made Chu Mu's eyes light up slightly, and he paid more attention. This was the first time he saw a unique swordsmanship technique in the ancient sword continent that was similar to Earth's swordsmanship world. Unknowingly, Chu Mu fell into deep thought. Although the ancient sword continent's basic swordsmanship began to be valued after the Qi transformation realm, its overall development was still not as good as Earth's, which specialized in basic swordsmanship. Chu Mu knew very well that although it was the same basic swordsmanship on Earth, after a long period of development and refinement, it eventually developed into many schools. After a swordsman's swordsmanship cultivation reached a certain level, they would be able to cultivate the unique swordsmanship techniques of their school, and then master them to achieve the goal of increasing the power of their swordsmanship. For example, the swordsmanship master who took Chu Mu as his disciple was called the Zhen Tian School. According to Chu Mu's master, the Zhen Tian School used to be a very powerful school in the swordsmanship world 1,000 years ago, known as one of the 3 major schools. There were many swordsmanship masters, and many swordsmanship grandmasters. It was rumored that there were even existences that surpassed swordsmanship grandmasters. However, it suddenly declined in a short period of time. All the masters disappeared, and only a few were left. The essence of the Zhen Tian school was also lost, and only a small part of the swordsmanship techniques remained. It was not until 1,000 years later that Chu Mu and his master were the only 2 people left in the Zhen Tian school. Chu Mu usually used the high-speed vibration of the sword, which was the swordsmanship technique of the Zhen Tian school. Chu Mu's master had been working hard to deduce and restore the latter essence, and then carry forward the Zhen Tian school and recreate the glory of 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, there was no progress. At that time, Chu Mu also had a dream. However, his dream was not to develop the Zhen Tian school and recreate the glory of 1,000 years ago, but to deduce and restore the essence of the Zhen Tian school. However, after a period of time, he realized that it was impossible. His realm was too low. Since then, he temporarily put aside the deduction of the Zhen Tian school and focused on improving his swordsmanship level and realm. He hoped that one day, when his realm was high enough, he would deduce and restore the essence of the Zhen Tian school. However, after transmigrating to the ancient sword continent and entering the world of swordsmen, Chu Mu's will also soared infinitely. The dreams of the past were temporarily sealed in the corner of his heart, untouched. Until today, when he suddenly saw Zhang Huanglong use a unique swordsmanship technique. Although it was not very mature, it gave Chu Mu a strong feeling. This feeling suddenly awakened the memories and dreams sealed in Chu Mu's heart. According to Master, the essence of the Zhen Tian school is very powerful. After mastering it and combining it with the external sword chi of a grandmaster, one sword strike can break a mountain and shatter it. Now I am already at the initial grandmaster realm. In terms of swordsmanship, I have already surpassed master. I have to pick up this dream again and deduce and restore the essence of the Zhen Tian school. Even if I can't deduce and restore it, I will open up the essence of the Zhen Tian school and recreate the Zhen Tian school completely. The swordsmanship is king competition is the starting point of my dream. With my current realm, it is undoubtedly very difficult to deduce the essence of the Zhen Tian school. However, if I can see more swordsmanship techniques and extract the essence for my own use, I believe that one day I will definitely be able to do it. Chu Mu's gaze became extremely firm. He clenched his fists and said to himself, "To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 243. Ear-piercing clanging sounds rang out continuously, and countless sparks flew in all directions. Lei Hao and Zhang Huanglong's swords clashed again and again. Their footsteps moved quickly, and without any specific rules, each sword greeted the other's body. Their swordsmanship was not something that ordinary Qi transformation realm swordsmen could compare with. The battle between them was very exciting, and neither was willing to give way to the other. Although they lacked the support of Xiantian sword Qi, and could not use other swordsmanship or sword moves, this kind of close combat made the blood of the audience boil. "Hey, who do you guys think will win in the end?" Suddenly, someone from the 10th group said. "Zhang Huanglong." "I also think Zhang Huanglong will win." "I think Zhang Huanglong will win." "Hey, who do you think will win?" Someone from the side suddenly touched Chu Mu's arm and asked. "Lei Hao." Chu Mu had just woken up from his thoughts and calmed down, so he casually answered and said what he thought. "You're thinking too much." The people beside him were startled at first, but then they sneered and said, "Seems like your eyesight is not that good. Lose." At this time, Zhang Huanglong roared and twisted his sword. A strange power surged towards Lei Hao's sword, and at the same time, another sword slashed towards Lei Hao. The speed of this sword was extremely fast, and it had become extremely violent. Once hit, one would definitely be injured. The winner is about to be decided. Haha, I knew Zhang Huanglong would win. However, Lei Hao was not nervous at all. A light flashed in his eyes, and the sword that was pushed away was unbelievably slashed again. It was even faster than Zhang Huanglong's sword, and it hit Zhang Huanglong's shoulder. The power exploded, and Zhang Huanglong fell to the side, almost falling off the stage. A figure flashed in front of him, and Lei Hao's sword was already pressed against his neck. Lei Hao wins, the 10th group judge announced. The crowd below was dumbstruck and unable to react. Zhang Huanglong covered his left shoulder and looked at Lei Hao with unwillingness before jumping off the arena. "Hey, how did you know that Lei Hao would win?" A voice came from beside Chu Mu. "Lei Hao's swordsmanship attainment is higher than Zhang Huanglong's," Chu Mu said simply. "I think Lei Hao's victory was purely due to luck. His swordsmanship attainment cannot be higher than Zhang Huanglong's." Someone immediately retorted. In fact, from the battle just now, Zhang Huanglong's technique was indeed superior. However, they did not have Chu Mu's realm. If they did, they would have been able to see the essence. Although Lei Hao did not have Zhang Huanglong's unique swordsmanship, having swordsmanship did not mean that he would definitely win. For example, let Chu Mu and Zhang Huanglong fight. Even if Zhang Huanglong's swordsmanship was doubled or tripled, Chu Mu could still easily defeat him without using the Zhen Tian style of swordsmanship. This Lei Hao is not simple. His swordsmanship attainment is much higher than Zhang Huanglong's. I wonder if he has any unique swordsmanship? Chu Mu thought to himself, ignoring the others. The first round of the first round had ended. Lei Hao was the winner, and Zhang Huanglong was the loser. He still had a chance. First round of the second round, Zhong Liang versus Li Wei. Zhong Liang walked towards the arena with his head held high. He glanced at the wooden rack, grabbed a sword, and lightly jumped onto the arena. Li Wei also jumped onto the stage with an unsharpened sword in his hand. There is no suspense in this match. Li Wei is not Zhong Liang's opponent. That's right. Zhong Liang was ranked 10th in the last tournament. Li Wei is too far behind. You should just admit defeat, Zhong Liang said to Li Wei with a smile full of confidence. Li Wei clenched his teeth. He also felt that he was not Zhong Liang's opponent and lacked confidence. He was hesitating whether or not to admit defeat. Zhong Liang's words aroused the pride in his heart. It's not certain who will lose. Since that's the case, I'll let you know the difference between us. As he spoke, Zhong Liang glanced at Chu Mu. The match began. Zhong Liang was indeed worthy of being ranked 10th in the last tournament. His swordsmanship was indeed extraordinary. He defeated Li Wei in less than 10 moves. Moreover, every move was an attack, forcing Li Wei to defend himself until he was finally defeated. Zhong Liang wins. Chu Mu also took some time to watch the match of the 7th group. It happened to be Liang Haishan's match. Originally, Liang Haishan's swordsmanship could only be considered SOSO. However, after entering the Blood Demon realm, he had received many pointers from Chu Mu. He improved and improved again and again. Although he was separated from Chu Mu later, Liang Haishan had received guidance to move forward. Therefore, when he was killing blood demons in the Blood Demon realm, he was constantly cultivating and deliberately guiding himself. After leaving the Blood Demon realm, he was constantly comprehending and practicing hard. Therefore, his improvement was very obvious. After watching Liang Haishan defeat his opponent in a few moves, Chu Mu knew that Liang Haishan was different from before. He might even have a chance to compete for the top 10 of the 7th group. Speaking of which, Liang Haishan could be considered a friend. If he could enter the top 100 of the academy, Chu Mu would also be happy for him. Zhong Liang won and entered the winning side. Li Wei lost and entered the losing side. The third match of the first round. The referee of the 10th group announced again. 2 people went up to the arena to compete. The winner entered the winning side and the loser entered the losing side. The 8th match of the first round. Chu Mu vs. Xu Ye, the referee of the 10th group announced. Chu Mu walked to the wooden rack and took a look. He grabbed a regular sword on it and jumped onto the arena. The moment he landed on the arena, Chu Mu felt a unique force invade him. He couldn't resist it. Immediately, the innate sword qi in his dantian became completely silent. It was as if his mind was also isolated. Chu Mu, who had passed the 3 stages of swordsmanship, knew that this feeling was the power of a seal. It prevented the students from subconsciously using innate sword qi and intent realm in the swordsmanship competition. Immediately after, a second person jumped onto the arena. A fragrant wind blew over. It was a woman. Shuya looked to be in her 20s. She was dressed in lake green clothes that accentuated her curvaceous figure. She wasn't a peerless beauty, but she was not bad. She gave off a gentle feeling like water and was very pleasing to the eye. Junior brother, why don't you admit defeat and let me win? Anyway, even if you lose this time, you still have one more chance. Shuya smiled with 2 dimples. Even if you lose, you still have one more chance. Chu Mu said with a faint smile. Then there's no other way. We can only use swordsmanship to determine the winner. Shuya pursed her lips and smiled. With a shout, she immediately stabbed out with her sword. A strong wind blew over. As soon as Shuya attacked, Chu Mu knew that Shuya's swordsmanship wasn't bad. Her sword had the essence of fast, accurate, and steady swordsmanship. But for Chu Mu, this kind of swordsmanship wasn't enough. Chu Mu could defeat Shuya with a single sword, but he didn't want to. At this time, he didn't need to expose too much of his swordsmanship. Both sides kept exchanging blows. The 2 swords collided from time to time. Amid the ear-piercing clanging sounds, countless sparks flew out. The 2 figures clashed and intertwined. Their footsteps were messy and seemingly without any pattern, but they were completely adaptable. It's just this kind of swordsmanship. Zhong Liang subconsciously stared at Chu Mu. After a while, a disdainful smile hung on the corner of his mouth. He secretly said that he was really disdainful of Chu Mu's swordsmanship. This kind of swordsmanship wasn't much different from Li Wei, who was defeated by him. Chu Mu had been controlling his swordsmanship. When it was about time, he deliberately showed a flaw. Sure enough, Xu Ye was fooled. When she attacked with her sword, Chu Mu immediately seized the opportunity to counterattack. The unsharpened sword fell on Xu Ye's snow-white neck. Chu Mu wins, the referee announced. Xu Ye snorted twice. She glared at Chu Mu and turned around to jump down. Chu Mu didn't care. He landed on the battle arena and placed the unsharpened sword on the wooden rack. Chu Mu won and was classified as the winner. Xu Ye lost and was classified as the loser. The 9th match of the first round. The referee read the name list again. 2 students went up to the battle arena to compete. 1 won and 1 lost. There were a total of 160 members in the 10th group. There were a total of 80 one-on-one matches. Time passed little by little. One match after another went on. Some people won and some lost. The situation of the other 9 groups was similar to that of the 10th group. Finally, all 80 matches ended. In the end, there were 80 winners and 80 losers. However, the 80 losers didn't mean that they were eliminated. They had no chance to enter the finals of the King of Swordsmanship competition because they still had one more chance. The 80 losers would compete one-on-one. Only those who lost again would be truly eliminated. Those who won would have one more chance to continue the competition. Among the 80 people who had lost this time, some of them had quite good swordsmanship attainments. Some of them were even obviously better than some of the 80 people who had won. The reason why they were defeated was because their opponents were more powerful than them in terms of swordsmanship. But it was fine. They still had one more chance. As long as they defeated their opponents, they could continue the competition. The losers' match started first. It was the first half of the second round. This time, I must win. I believe that with my swordsmanship, I can definitely get into the top 10 of this group. Many of the losers secretly clenched their fists and encouraged themselves. As for whether they could really defeat their opponents and continue the competition, they could only wait until the end of the competition to find out. Chu Mu belonged to the winning side. After the 40 matches of the 80 losers, it would be the turn of the 80 winners. So now, Chu Mu had nothing to do and was reduced to a spectator. However, he was very happy because this was a good opportunity to observe other people's swordsmanship. What a bunch of pitiful people. Zhong Liang crossed his arms in front of his chest and said coldly, "A competition between losers. Senior brother Zhong is right. But we have to give them some hope." Someone immediately agreed. Although there were people who didn't agree with Zhong Liang's words, no one refuted him. Some people didn't dare to, and some people were disdainful, such as Chu Mu. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 244. Soon, the 80 students from the losing side finished their 40 matches. The 40 winners were qualified to continue the competition, while the 40 losers were directly eliminated and had no chance to participate in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Although there might be some small mistakes, they had tried their best to eliminate all possible accidents and ensure that the 40 students who were eliminated had the weaker swordsmanship. It was worth mentioning that the female student, Xu Ye, who was defeated by Chu Mu, actually defeated her opponent and successfully obtained the qualifications to continue the competition. After Xu Ye won, she specially glanced at Chu Mu. Her expression was clearly provoking Chu Mu, but it wasn't repulsive. Instead, it was a little mischievous, which made Chu Mu smile. After the losing side finished their 40 matches, it was the turn of the 80 winners. The first match of the second round, Zhao Yulong vs. Wang Rui. Chu Mu had seen Zhao Yulong and Wang Rui's previous matches. They were not bad and were slightly stronger than Shuya. It will probably take a lot of effort for the two of them to determine the winner, Chu Mu thought. After Zhao Yulong and Wang Rui got on the stage, they began to attack. Sword shadows flashed and tore through the air with a slight sharp sound. The two of them had similar attainments in swordsmanship, so the battle was almost even. It was difficult to determine who was better. It was very intense. "Hey, who do you think will win this time?" Someone next to Chu Mu touched him and asked. It was the person who asked, Lei Hao or Zhang Huanglong, who would win. Wang Rui. Chu Mu glanced at him and softly said two words. Wang Rui. That person suddenly stared a few times, but shook his head and muttered, "At that time, I think Zhao Yulong will win. Didn't you see Zhao Yulong's attacks gradually become fiercer, and Wang Rui gradually switched from offense to defense?" Chu Mu's expression did not change, and he did not pay any attention to him. Only those with good eyesight would be able to see through the profoundness within. The other party was only confused by the superficial appearance. Therefore, Chu Mu did not explain. After about 10 more moves, Zhao Yulong's ferocious offensive suddenly paused. Wang Rui seized the momentary gap to counterattack and defeat Zhao Yulong. Wang Rui actually won? That person's face was full of disbelief, and the few people beside him were also full of astonishment. "Hey friend, why don't you explain? Why did you judge Wang Rui to be the winner?" In the end, Wang Rui really did win. The student shamelessly asked. Zhao Yulong and Wang Rui's swordsmanship is on par with each other. It will be difficult to determine the victor. The two of them should have known this, so Zhao Yulong sped up his attacks and became more ferocious in an attempt to defeat Wang Rui. However, he did not expect Wang Rui's defensive ability to be so strong. Chu Mu casually explained, "Fierce attacks cannot be endless." Wang Rui seized the moment when Zhao Yulong took a breath to counterattack, and thus defeated Zhao Yulong in a short period of time. The victory between them was not determined by the level of their swordsmanship, but by the application of their brains. The few people beside him nodded thoughtfully as they listened. Lei Hao, on the other hand, looked at Chu Mu a few more times. Zhong Liang's lips curled into a cold smile as he said indifferently, "Everyone understands this logic." Chu Mu did not pay attention to Zhong Liang, because the referee had already announced the second winner of the second round. The fourth winner of the second round, Lei Hao vs. Song Dongxiu. "It's him," Chu Mu thought to himself. Lei Hao's first round had attracted Chu Mu's attention. Chu Mu could see that Lei Hao had concealed part of his swordsmanship level, so Chu Mu could not truly deduce Lei Hao's swordsmanship level. Song Dongxiu will not be Lei Hao's match. Chu Mu glanced at Lei Hao's opponent and thought to himself. Lei Hao and Song Dongxiu's match began. This time, Lei Hao was different from the first round. As soon as he drew his sword, he immediately launched a ferocious attack. Sword after sword stabbed out. Every sword was a combination of strength and speed, incomparably fast and abnormally ferocious. This fighting style was clearly out of Song Dongxiu's expectations. Song Dongxiu's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly used his sword to block, one strike after another. Song Dongxiu's swordsmanship was not bad, so he was able to block every strike of Lei Hao's ferocious strike, but he was unable to counterattack. This time, Song Dongxiu should win. He was ranked 813th in the last round's overall ranking. He can be ranked 84th in this academy. The person beside Chu Mu seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Chu Mu. "Lei Hao," Chu Mu said softly. "Lei Hao will win?" That person was stunned for a moment. "That's not right. According to what you said just now, Lei Hao's attacks are very ferocious. After a spurt of energy, he will definitely be exhausted. Once he is exhausted and needs to take a breath, Song Guangxiu will seize the opportunity to counterattack and lose." Chu Mu shook his head slightly and did not continue speaking. That student's words were indeed very reasonable, But the problem was that Lei Hao himself definitely understood this point. Since he understood it, why would he still attack so ferociously? It was nothing more than confidence. Lei Hao was confident that he could defeat Song Guangxu before he was exhausted. Chu Mu did not explain, and the people beside him immediately thought that he had no reason. They all snorted and looked at the battle. Lei Hao's attacks were still incomparably ferocious, and there were no signs of exhaustion at all. That kind of feeling was like a human-shaped ferocious beast, very terrifying. Song Guangxu's face was somewhat pale. Although he was still able to block every strike of Lei Hao, Chu Mu's sharp senses had already noticed that Song Guangxu's sword hand was slightly trembling. Lei Hao also noticed this point. After his first strike was blocked, he withdrew his sword and roared. His aura was astonishing, and his next strike was even more ferocious and faster. Song Guangxu's face changed greatly. The aura of this sword was extremely strong, like a ferocious beast rushing towards him. If he could use Xiantian's sword qi, he would not be afraid. But in this state it was simply impossible to block. An incomparably ear-piercing sound exploded, and a sword flew up high. It was Song Guangxu's sword. His hand was slightly twitching, and Lei Hao's sword was slashing towards him. The wind whistled, as if this sword was going to cut off his head. With a tremble, Lei Hao's sword steadily stopped at Song Guangxu's neck, and did not move at all. It showed that Lei Hao's incomparably exquisite swordsmanship foundation. When he should move, and when he should stay still, he should stay still. Lei Hao wins. The referee announced. Too exciting. Yeah, when Lei Hao's attack started, I felt as if a storm was attacking me. I was simply unable to breathe. Song Guangxu is also not simple. Although he was defeated in the end, he was able to resist Lei Hao's terrifying attacks for a long time. A dark horse. Lei Hao is definitely a dark horse in this year's King of Swords tournament. Lei Hao actually won. I was right again. The person next to Chu Mu suddenly laughed embarrassedly. Chu Mu ignored them as he was thinking. From just now, I can see that Lei Hao is displaying his strength step by step. I can be sure that this is definitely not his true level of swordsmanship. His level of swordsmanship must be even higher. Chu Mu thought to himself. Suddenly, a wave of interest appeared in his heart. He wanted to spar with Lei Hao to see what Lei Hao's true level of swordsmanship was. However, whether or not he could spar with Lei Hao would depend on the referee's arrangement. Chu Mu could not interfere. The winner of the second round, the 10th match, Zhong Liang vs. Huang Yushan. Zhong Liang's lips curled into a faint smile, looking like an expert in swordsmanship. Junior sister, I will go easy on you. Huang Yushan's face was expressionless. She stabbed out with her sword and the match began. Although Zhong Liang was a little arrogant, his swordsmanship was really good. At least up until now, other than Lei Hao, whom Chu Mu could not see through, he was the most profound swordsmanship. In the end, Huang Yushan was naturally not his match and was defeated. And in the other 9 groups, there was a similar situation as Lei Hao, with dark horses appearing. The dark horse of the 7th group was Liang Haishan. Liang Haishan's fighting style was not as direct and fierce as Lei Hao's, but his broad and wide swordsmanship, coupled with the subtle changes in the swordsmanship, fully displayed the 4 key points of swordsmanship: speed, accuracy, steadiness, and ferocity. Therefore, in both matches, he defeated his opponents without any difficulty and successfully entered the winning side of the new 40 people. The winner of the second round, the 23rd match, Chu Mu vs. Gu Luo. Chu Mu picked up his unsharpened sword and jumped onto the arena. The innate sword qi and mental realm in his dantian were all cut off, making him unable to move or use them. Gu Luo went on stage and said, Chu Mu, I watched your match with Shuya. Your swordsmanship is not bad, but compared to me, it's not good enough. You should admit defeat so as not to waste time. Make your move. The truth will tell you the result. Chu Mu said indifferently. Gu Luo smiled and suddenly took a step forward. This step was straight like a bow, and his waist and horse became one. His strength was transmitted to his arm and straight to the sword. The sword seemed to pierce through a steel plate, bringing with it a slight ear-piercing sound as it pierced towards Chu Mu. Many people only saw a sword shadow with a trace of sword light in front of them. It was so fast that it was hard for people to react. Gu Luo was ranked 685 in the last King of Swordsmanship tournament. He can be ranked 63rd in the academy. He must be more powerful now than he was 3 years ago. Yes, in my opinion, Gu Luo will definitely win this battle. There is no doubt about it. Yes, although this Chu Mu's swordsmanship is not bad, he is still too young. Maybe if he is given a few more years, he can become even more powerful and compete with Gu Luo. Just as many students were discussing, Gu Luo's sword suddenly missed. Then, a cold star bloomed in front of him. He hurriedly waved his sword to block, but there was no sound of collision. Gu Luo's sword missed again, and another cold star bloomed in front of him. This time, Chu Mu used a small part of his strength to fight with Gu Luo. However, he controlled his swordsmanship to be at the same level as Gu Luo's, using this to temper his skills and so on. Not long after, Chu Mu completely understood Gu Luo's swordsmanship. Chu Mu also cracked the subtle swordsmanship that was taking shape. Chu Mu defeated Gu Luo in one strike. Gu Luo actually lost. Inconceivable, could this Chu Mu be a dark horse like Lei Hao? Even if he is a dark horse in this group, he is definitely not as good as Lei Hao. Once he encounters Lei Hao, he will only be defeated. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 245. A dark horse referred to a person who wasn't thought highly of but displayed strength that exceeded everyone's expectations. To be crowned as a dark horse was a kind of affirmation in itself. To be crowned as a dark horse, one needed to be strong enough. Here, to be crowned as a dark horse, in addition to the above conditions, it had to be the first time participating in the King of Swordsmanship tournament. Soon, the last of the 40 matches in the second round was over. Up until now, after 2 rounds, there were a total of 160 matches. Everyone had participated in at least 2 matches. Other than a portion of people who had deliberately concealed their level of swordsmanship, most of the students' level of swordsmanship was known by the spectating students and the participating students. There were more than one dark horse in the other group. After all, it was not easy to enter the inner mansion. There were a total of 3 people crowned as dark horses in Group 10. The first was Lei Hao, the second was Chu Mu, and the third was Jin Xia, a female student. Jin Xia's performance in the first round was not eye-catching, and it seemed to be a little difficult for her to defeat her opponent. However, in the second round, for some unknown reason, she became high-profile and defeated her opponent with only 3 moves. Her opponent was a senior student who ranked 738th on the King of Swordsmanship tournament in the previous King of Swordsmanship tournament, and could be ranked 72nd in the academy. Jin Xia defeated her opponent with 3 moves and was in the limelight for a while. She even showed signs of overshadowing Chu Mu and Lei Hao. She was vaguely known as the first dark horse in Group 10. Lei Hao was ranked 2nd and Chu Mu was ranked 3rd. Chu Mu did not care about this ranking. After the first and second round ended, the third round began after a short rest. The third round of the competition was held after the first round of 80 people who won the first round went on to fight in the second round. The 40 people who lost the first round and the 40 people who won the second round were rearranged. The 80 people who won the first round would go on to fight in the second round, and the 40 people who won the second round would be reduced to spectators. When the third round began, 40 people would fight 40 people. I feel that your swordsmanship is not that simple. A voice rang out in Chu Mu's ears. In an instant, he determined that it was a sword qi transmission. Turning his head, he saw Lei Hao looking over. Lei Hao's expression was calm, but his eyes contained traces of battle intent. Same here, Chu Mu replied with his sword chi. I look forward to our battle. The battle intent in Lei Hao's eyes became even more apparent as a confident smile appeared on his face. Oh, Jin Xia's swordsmanship is more eye-catching than ours. Shouldn't you be looking forward to fighting her? Chu Mu replied. She. Lei Hao paused for a moment. She might be good, but my instincts tell me that her swordsmanship is definitely incomparable to yours or mine. She isn't qualified to be my opponent. I'm looking forward to it too, Chu Mu replied. He was even more curious now. Jin Xia's swordsmanship was indeed good, but Chu Mu could tell that even if she still had some reservations, it was not much. Compared to Lei Hao, who could not see the depth of his swordsmanship, there was a huge difference. Therefore, not only did Lei Hao not take Jin Xia seriously, but Chu Mu also did not take her seriously. The so-called number 1 dark horse was just an empty title. While Chu Mu and Lei Hao were chatting, the first round of the third round had already begun, and the second round was about to begin. For the students who were defeated in the first round, this was a very good way to prove themselves, and that was to defeat their opponent. Once they defeated their opponents, not only would they prove their strength, but they would also be qualified to continue the competition. However, if they failed, they would be directly eliminated and would not be able to enter the finals of the King of Swordsmanship competition. Therefore, in order to maintain their qualification, everyone showed their strength, and even exceeded their usual performance, in order to achieve victory. Therefore, on the whole, the third round of the competition was more exciting than the previous 2 rounds. The students were so excited that their blood was boiling, and they could not wait to fight to their heart's content. After some time, the 40 matches of the third round ended. Those who were defeated by Jin Xia, Lei Hao, and Chu Mu all won in the third round, and were qualified to participate in the fourth round of the competition. However, they were all praying in their hearts that they would not encounter the previous 3 opponents again. Only they had personally experienced the strength of their opponent. Thinking about it carefully, they really were not opponents that they could compete with. After the third round ended, the referee announced a quarter of an hour's rest. Only then did the crowd have the leisure to look at the other arenas. At this time, the first, second, and third arenas were already in the fourth round of the competition. The fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh arenas were the same as the 10th, and were in the middle of a break. The 8th and 9th arenas were still in the third round of the competition, but it seemed that they were nearing the end. A quarter of an hour passed quickly, and the fourth round of the competition was about to begin. The fourth round of the competition was between the 40 people who had not lost in the previous 3 rounds, and the 40 people who had lost in the previous round, but won in the third round. Of course, it was not the same as the previous 40 people against the 40 people who had lost in the previous round. Instead, the 80 people were grouped together and arranged by the referee. In this way, it could be a battle between the strong and the weak, or a battle between the weak, or even a battle between the strong and the strong. The first match of the fourth round, Jin Xia versus Li Qing'er. Senior sister Jin Xia, please show mercy. Both of them were female students, and Li Qing'er saluted as soon as she got on the stage. Show me your strongest strength, Jin Xia said coldly, and did not relax because of her opponent's request. Li Qing'er curled her lips and immediately attacked with her sword. She knew that her swordsmanship was not as good as Jin Xia's, and the chances of her winning were slim, but not impossible. Therefore, she wanted to distract Jin Xia by speaking first. As long as Jin Xia relaxed, she would have a chance. She did not expect Jin Xia to be unmoved, and had to suddenly attack with her sword in an attempt to catch Jin Xia off guard. However, an excellent swordsman would always be alert and react quickly. The moment Li Qing'er attacked with her sword, Jin Xia attacked with her sword as well. She attacked first, but arrived later. Her sword stabbed at Li Qing'er, and Li Qing'er's expression changed. she hurriedly retreated and blocked with her sword. Jin Xia seemed to have made up her mind to defeat Li Qing in the shortest time possible. Therefore, when she gained the upper hand with her sword, she attacked with 4 sword light, which made Li Qing misjudge and defeated her in one move. So easy! Did you see that? That was 4 sword light. I'm sure that 4 sword light is definitely not her limit, the students discussed. Chu Mu was not surprised that Jin Xia could attack with 4 sword light. Huang Shaoan, who was ranked in the 800s, could attack with 5 sword light. Jin Xia, who was obviously stronger than Huang Shaoan, definitely had a limit of more than 5 sword light. It was not difficult for her to attack with 4 sword light. Lei Hao glanced at Jin Xia, and a trace of interest flashed in his eyes. It was not the kind of interest between a man and a woman, but the interest of seeing a strong opponent. Soon after, Lei Hao looked at Chu Mu, paying special attention to Chu Mu's eyes. He discovered that although Chu Mu's eyes were also looking at the golden glow, they were very calm without any ripples. The fighting intent in his eyes couldn't help but grow even stronger. The second round of the 4th round, the 3rd round of the 4th round, the 4th round of the 4th round, the judges of the 10 groups kept announcing, and the 4th round of the 4th round of the competition went on one after another. The 10th round of the 4th round, Lei Hao vs. Yu Qing. It is my honor to compete with the second dark horse in swordsmanship. Yu Qing laughed heartily after getting on the stage. He looked very straightforward and heroic. His appearance was also relatively rough, and when he spoke, he would grab the back of his head with one hand. It was easy for people to have a good impression of him. I won't hold back, Lei Hao said with a smile. It was the first time he had smiled in the competition. That's great. Even if I lose in the end, I will still be happy. Yu Qing laughed and suddenly he attacked with his sword. The sword he used was bigger and heavier than the average sword, so when he attacked it was extremely fierce, as if it was going to split a huge rock. It was too fast, too sudden, too fierce. Lei Hao was furious. He did not expect that this guy, who looked so simple and honest, was actually a cunning person. He did not dodge but counterattacked. His sword was even fiercer than before. If Yu Cheng's sword gave people the feeling that it was going to split a huge rock, then Lei Hao's sword gave people the feeling that it was going to shatter a huge rock. Lei Hao was furious. He originally thought that Yu Qing had a good impression of him, but he did not expect that everything was just a facade. Lei Hao was angry, and his sword was even fiercer and faster than before. It was so fast that people were dazzled, and so fierce that people even forgot to breathe. Yu Cheng's strongest sword attack was split apart by Lei Hao. Lei Hao's sword attack was like a storm. Yu Cheng's face changed, and he quickly held his sword with both hands to block. Every time he blocked a sword attack, his face turned a little paler. His arms trembled slightly, and his muscles bulged. He felt a huge force passing through his body, and his muscles began to feel sore and numb. At this time, Yu Qing had no time to regret. I admit defeat, stop immediately, Yu Qing shouted. But the angry Lei Hao did not care at all. Referee, I admit defeat. Yu Cheng's sword was sent flying. Seeing the incomparably ferocious sword slashing towards him, the aura of death enveloped him, causing him to be scared out of his wits. He hurriedly screamed. A figure flashed, and a figure appeared in front of Yu Qing, holding Lei Hao's sword with 2 fingers. Yu Cheng's face was pale, and he sat down on the arena, gasping for breath. His pupils were dilating, and his eyes were filled with fear. Lei Hao wins. The referee released his fingers and announced. Lei Hao looked at Yu Qing coldly, then turned around and jumped off the arena. Chu Mu realized that the referee was able to catch Lei Hao's sword because he could use Xiantian's sword qi. In other words, the seal of the arena was only effective on the students, or it was only effective on the qi transformation stage and below. Too scary. I thought Yu Qing was going to be killed by Lei Hao. My heart is about to stop. Yu Qing deserved it. He is obviously a sinister person, but he still pretended to be generous. 4th round, 11th battle, Zhong Liang vs Chu Mu. The referee flew down and announced again. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 246. The title of the third dark horse is not bad. I also admit that you have potential in swordsmanship, but you still need time to compete with me. Zhong Liang held his unsharpened sword and pointed it to the ground. He stared at Chu Mu and said in a condescending manner. Chu Mu smiled and did not say anything. Zhong Liang's swordsmanship was not bad, but it depended on who he was compared to. If he was compared to Chu Mu, Zhong Liang was nothing. In front of a swordsmanship grandmaster, anyone who had not reached the grandmaster level was just an ant. This was an unchangeable fact. Zhong Liang's eyes turned cold. Chu Mu's attitude had made him very unhappy. Since you don't want to admit defeat, don't blame me for being impolite. Zhong Liang shouted and the audience started to discuss. This is bad. It seems that Chu Mu, the dark horse, is going to die here. Yes, Senior Zhong Liang's swordsmanship was ranked 10th in our academy 3 years ago. After 3 years of cultivation, Senior Zhong's swordsmanship must be more profound than before. If he didn't meet Senior Zhong Liang, Chu Mu, the dark horse, would be able to get into the top 10 of this group and qualify for the King of Swordsmanship finals. There's no if. Now that he meets Senior Zhong, his defeat is certain. I just hope that he can defeat his opponent in the next round and qualify for the competition again. Before the battle started, the students were discussing and judging the result. They all agreed that Chu Mu was not Zhong Liang's match. Zhong Liang's swordsmanship is indeed profound. Even I am not 100% sure that I can defeat him. Lei Hao looked back and forth between Zhong Liang and Chu Mu and said to himself, "But I have a feeling that you can defeat him. Show me your true swordsmanship. I am looking forward to fighting with you." No one knew what Lei Hao was thinking. Otherwise, they would be shocked and think that he was crazy. Jin Xia stared coldly at Chu Mu and Zhong Liang. Zhong Liang's swordsmanship is above mine, but Chu Mu's swordsmanship is obviously not as good as mine. He is no match for Zhong Liang. Did you hear that? Everyone has already said your final outcome. I advise you to admit defeat, so as to avoid making a fool of yourself, Zhong Liang said with a smile. Since you are so confident in your swordsmanship, then make your move, Chu Mu said indifferently. He understood that when some people had some strength, they would uncontrollably have a sense of superiority in their hearts. Subconsciously, they would feel that they were superior to others. Therefore, whatever they said would be reflected, which would make others feel uncomfortable. Zhong Liang let out a cold snort. Without wasting any more words, he thrust out his sword. Although he did not put Chu Mu in his eyes, Zhong Liang did not go easy on him. This was the attitude of a swordsman. Strategically, one would look down on the enemy and constantly provoke them with words to weaken the enemy's fighting spirit. Tactically, one would not go easy on the enemy. Zhong Liang's sword was as fast as lightning. It was so fast that it made people's eyelids twitch. It seemed that he wanted to defeat Chu Mu with a single strike. How will you deal with this? Lei Hao's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. Chu Mu took a step forward, causing Zhong Liang's sword to miss. Zhong Liang was surprised. Zhong Liang swung his sword horizontally and chased after Chu Mu. He did not give Chu Mu any chance. Chu Mu's footsteps were messy. He was able to advance and retreat freely. Zhong Liang's sword missed every time. The onlookers were all dumbfounded. This Chu Mu was indeed holding back. The referee of Group 10 stroked his beard and secretly smiled. He felt that Chu Mu had held back a lot in the previous battle. That was why he purposely arranged for Chu Mu and Zhong Liang to fight. Zhong Liang did not get angry even though his sword strikes had failed. Instead, He calmed down even more, showing the qualities of an excellent swordsman. His sword strikes were faster and fiercer, with more variations. However, he still could not hit Chu Mu. What a high dodging ability! Lei Hao and Jin Xia's expressions changed. They were secretly shocked. Zhong Liang's sword paused. Just when people thought that he was going to stop, he thrust out another sword. This time, 5-sword light dazzled people's eyes. However, the 5-sword light did not have any effect on Chu Mu. You have shocked me. Therefore, I will use my full strength. Zhong Liang's expression changed. He slashed out again. 10-sword light dazzled people's eyes. It was hard to tell which was real and which was fake. In the next moment, the 10-sword light suddenly flashed and converged. This sword strike carried a dazzling light that made people close their eyes and cover their eyes with their palms. At the same time, the same thought appeared in their minds. Chu Mu is going to lose. Zhong Liang also thought so. He actually reached the light realm. Chu Mu is in danger. Lei Hao narrowed his eyes and thought. However, Zhong Liang's sword strike missed again. Before he could react, he felt his chest being slashed. Under the explosion of power, he could not control his body and fell back. His chest felt tight and it was difficult to breathe. Zhong Liang fell to the ground on his butt. Before he could even breathe properly, he felt a cold sensation on his neck. He knew very well that it was the touch of a sword. This Chu Mu is the real dark horse in this group. No, he should be the biggest dark horse in this courtyard. The smile on the judge's face became even more obvious. He nodded inwardly and felt a little excited. There were countless competitions in the Sword Mansion. The competition in the 10 inner courtyard was very intense. The Sword Art is King competition was one of them. If there were more sword experts in their courtyard and they could obtain a higher ranking, the elders would also feel proud. Chu Mu wins. The judge's voice was especially loud. The students all put down their palms and opened their eyes to look, only to see Chu Mu's sword pressed against Zhong Liang's neck, while Zhong Liang's face was blank as he sat on the ground in astonishment. This scene was similar to what the students had imagined, but the roles had been switched, causing them to be unable to react for a moment. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Chu Mu actually won? Senior brother Zhong actually lost. So Chu Mu is the biggest dark horse. Chu Mu put away his sword. He looked at Zhong Liang and did not say anything. He turned around and jumped off the arena. He placed his sword on the wooden rack. Zhong Liang's face turned green, then red, then white. He was so ashamed that he wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. Victory and defeat are common for swordsmen. Don't be arrogant and complacent when you win and feel discouraged when you lose. If you can't even accept this little bit of victory and defeat, how can you go further on the path of swordsmanship? The judge's face turned cold. His tone was very serious. Zhong Liang's face changed back and forth. He got up and walked down the arena. He saluted the judge and placed his sword on the wooden rack. Although he had calmed down after hearing the judge's words, there were still some knots in his heart that had not been untied. Therefore, he walked to the loser's side with a calm face and stood there without saying a word. Your swordsmanship is really beyond imagination. I'm looking forward to fighting you more and more. When Chu Mu walked over, Lei Hao's sword aura transmitted his voice. There will be a chance. Chu Mu replied. Jin Xia also looked at Chu Mu with great interest. She was not interested in Chu Mu as a person, but in his swordsmanship. The judge looked at Chu Mu a few more times, then picked up the list again and continued to announce the next match. After some time, the 4th round of matches ended. The students were given another quarter of an hour to rest. In this kind of pure swordsmanship battle, if one could easily defeat the opponent, it would not consume much energy. However, if two people's swordsmanship was at the same level, it would consume a lot of energy. If one did not rest well, it would affect the later matches. The quarter of an hour passed quickly and the 5th round began. The fifth round began with the losing side's 40 people. Because Zhong Liang was defeated by Chu Mu, he also belonged to the losing side. However, with Zhong Liang's swordsmanship level, even if he belonged to the losing side, he could still continue to fight and defeat his opponent again to obtain the right to continue. The losing side's 20 matches ended in the fifth round, and it was now the turn of the winning side's 20 matches. Perhaps the judge had done it on purpose, but Chu Mu, Lei Hao, and Jin Xia did not meet each other in these 20 matches. They also successfully defeated their opponents and advanced to the next round. In the judge's eyes, Chu Mu, Lei Hao, and Jin Xia were all dark horses. Although there were differences in their strengths, if they could rank in the top 10 of their group and enter the finals of swordsmanship as king, they would definitely be able to obtain a good ranking. Another quarter of an hour to rest. The sixth round of matches began. The sixth round was between the winning side of the fifth round, which had been defeated by Chu Mu, and the losing side of the fifth round, which had been defeated by Zhong Liang, and the winning side of the fifth round, which had a total of 40 people. As expected of Astral Nine's 10th place, Zhong Liang's swordsmanship was extraordinary, especially after he had been defeated by Chu Mu. Perhaps it was because he had calmed down, but Chu Mu had unexpectedly discovered that Zhong Liang's swordsmanship had improved. It seems that Zhong Liang isn't just arrogant, Chu Mu muttered to himself. The 10th group's matches were in full swing, and the other 9 groups' matches were also very intense. Cheers could be heard from the third group, as one of the 2 competitors was Huang Buju, and the other was the number 1 dark horse of the third group, Qin Tian. Both of their swordsmanship was extraordinary. However, Huang Buju's swordsmanship was superior. His swordsmanship was as unpredictable as his name. A basic swordsmanship became incomparably flexible in his hands, as if he was a heavenly steed soaring through the skies, leaving no trace behind. With one strike, it was impossible to predict where his next attack would come from. Without any judgment, one would fall into a passive position and be led by the nose by their opponent. In the end, one would only be left with one's defeat. Thus, the number 1 dark horse of the third group, Qin Tian, was defeated by Huang Buju in the end. Huang Buju had a mysterious smile on his face throughout the match, which seemed to be his signature smile. Other than Huang Buju from the third group, the top 7 students from the first group, second group, and so on were all extremely powerful. They were not people that the dark horses could shake, as they were all ranked in the top 100 of the previous Academy's Sword King rankings. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 247. After the 6th round of the competition ended, the 7th round of the competition began after a 15-minute break. The 7th round of the competition was between the 20 contestants who had maintained their winning streak since the first round and the 20 contestants who had won in the 6th round of the competition. There were a total of 40 contestants. Those who had been eliminated were those who had been confirmed to be inferior to others in swordsmanship after at least 2 rounds of the competition. Those who were able to defeat their opponents and continue to compete were usually those who had a higher level of swordsmanship. Just like the great waves washing away the sand, the dregs were washed away layer by layer, leaving behind the pearls, the essence. Hence, the later rounds of the competition were more exciting as they were all duels between swordsmanship experts. The first round of the 7th round, Jin Xia versus Wang Hong, the referee announced. Jin Xia had to show off more this time as she had to. Although Wang Hong's ranking in the previous batch was not as good as Zhong Liang's, he was still ranked 24th in the Academy and 237th in the King of Swordsmanship ranking board. He was very impressive. A tough battle. Jin Xia was completely immersed in a tough battle. She gave full play to her swordsmanship without holding back. Wang Hong also knew how powerful Jin Xia was. He did not dare to hold back and gave full play to his swordsmanship. Both of them gave full play to their swordsmanship, and the battle was very intense. The audience held their breaths and clenched their fists tightly as they watched, afraid that they would miss any exciting part of the battle. To the contestants, this was a rare opportunity. Where else could one go to see so many swordsmanship experts fighting with pure swordsmanship? It was difficult, extremely difficult. Only places like the Sword Residence would hold the King of Swordsmanship competition that was held once every 3 years. Watching such a competition was very effective in broadening their horizons and improving their swordsmanship. Lei Hao and Chu Mu's expressions did not change, but Zhong Liang's eyes flashed. Jin Xia's swordsmanship was very strong. Although it was not as good as his, he knew that even if he wanted to defeat Jin Xia, he would have to put in a lot of effort. Subconsciously, Zhong Liang looked at Chu Mu and found that Chu Mu's face was calm and indifferent. He couldn't help but be startled. When he was defeated by Chu Mu, he was extremely ashamed. Even the words of the referee did not resolve the knot in his heart. But after all, he had a certain level of foundation. The knot in his heart was untied during the competition, and his swordsmanship had improved. Thinking back to his battle with Chu Mu, he realized that he had been on the defensive against Chu Mu. It looked like he was attacking while Chu Mu was dodging, but it was this process that made him fall into a passive position. Unknowingly, his rhythm was controlled by his opponent. It was impossible to notice the situation at the time. Only after carefully reviewing it would one be able to understand. Compared to the kind of opponent who made you lose clearly, only the kind who made you lose unknowingly and think that the opponent won because of good luck was more terrifying. Therefore, Zhong Liang was now full of fear towards Chu Mu. He had a very contradictory feeling. He wanted to fight with Chu Mu again to see if his thoughts were true or false, but he was also very afraid of that feeling. He felt afraid for no reason. The battle between Jin Xia and Wang Hong finally ended. Wang Hong fell on the arena in a human shape. His face was pale and he was gasping for breath. Even his sword had fallen to the side and he could not move. Although Jin Xia was also standing, her face was extremely pale. The weakness in her eyes could not be concealed. This battle was too tiring. It was really too tiring. She was only able to stand because she gritted her teeth. Jin Xia wins. The referee took a look and announced. The second battle of the 7th round, the third battle of the 7th round, the 20 battles of the 7th round were carried out one after another. Other than Jin Xia, who was in a tough battle, Chu Mu and Lei Hao were not in a tough battle. The two of them gave the impression that they would become stronger when facing a strong opponent. The stronger the opponent, the stronger the strength they displayed. Therefore, they were not in a tough battle like Jin Xia. They are all so strong. Jin Xia, who was trying her best to recover her strength, was shocked. She thought that she was the strongest among the 3 dark horses, but now she realized that she was the weakest. For a moment, the bitterness in her heart could not be expressed. The 7th round ended. 20 wins and 20 losses. Another 15 minutes of rest time. In the 8th round, the 20 losers continued to fight. The 10 winners were qualified to continue, and the 10 losers were eliminated. In the 8th round, the 20 winners continued to fight. Chu Mu and Lei Hao were still stronger than their opponents and defeated their opponent. Lei Hao's swordsmanship was still as fierce and fast. Chu Mu, who was always calm, won in a baffling way. For a moment, no one knew how he won. On the other hand, Jin Xia lost because she barely won the last round against Wang Hong. She was exhausted. Her physical strength had not fully recovered since the 8th round began, and her mental exhaustion had not been relieved. Although her opponent was a little weaker than Wang Hong, the difference was not too big. Therefore, Jin Xia was defeated in the end. The 8th round ended. Another 15 minutes of rest time. During this time, Jin Xia's mental exhaustion was relieved, and her physical strength was almost recovered. In the 9th round, the 20 losers of the 8th round began. Jin Xia won and was qualified to continue. In the 9th round, the 10 winners fought. Chu Mu, Lei Hao, and Zhong Liang did not meet. The judges deliberately arranged them to be separated. They each defeated their opponents and successfully advanced. The 10th round of the competition began. It was between the 10 winners of the 9th round and the 10 losers of the 9th round. In this round, Jin Xia had fully recovered and her swordsmanship had improved. Her opponent was similar to Wang Hong, so Jin Xia won in the end. However, it was very difficult for her to win this time. The 11th round, which was the last round of the preliminary round, was finally about to begin. The last 20 students all had extraordinary swordsmanship. They were all confident that they would win the preliminary round. The first round of the 11th round, Chu Mu versus Jin Xia, the judge announced loudly. It's Chu Mu versus Jin Xia. It's a clash between two dark horses. This time, Chu Mu will definitely win. Until now, I still can't see how strong he is. Jin Xia barely won the last 2 rounds. The battle had not yet begun, but the result was already known. Please enlighten me. Jin Xia felt depressed at first because she knew that she was no match for Chu Mu. However, she quickly adjusted her mentality. Even if she was no match for him, she had to fight. At least, she could learn something from it. Draw your sword, Chu Mu said lightly. Excuse me. Jin Xia's voice fell. Her sword was swift and fierce, brazenly thrusting out like lightning. This was her last battle. Even though she knew that she would lose, she would not be afraid. She had to give it her all and show all her strength. She even went beyond her usual performance. All scruples were thrown to the back of her mind. There was only one thought in her mind. Draw your sword. Draw your sword. Draw your sword. Draw your sword. Jin Xia's sword was faster than the previous one. She suddenly entered a strange state. She forgot about herself. There was only the sword in her heart, the sword in her eyes, and the sword in her hands. Chu Mu could easily feel Jin Xia's state. He knew that it was not easy to achieve this state. Under this state, her swordsmanship would improve significantly. The judge also noticed Jin Xia's state and frowned slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Chu Mu dodged and blocked. He did not counterattack. Although he could defeat Jin Xia with one counterattack, it would also interrupt Jin Xia's current state. As a swordsman, Chu Mu knew that it was not easy to achieve this state. Moreover, Jin Xia was not an enemy. Therefore, he gave her this opportunity. Jin Xia's sword became even sharper, displaying the sharpness of the sword. The surrounding air became cold. After a while, Jin Xia's sword suddenly turned and its speed slowly decreased. However, each sword contained a dazzling sword light, and its power became even stronger. Zhong Liang and Lei Hao's pupils contracted. Jin Xia's swordsmanship had improved again and was approaching their level. At this moment, Jin Xia's sword paused and she woke up. She looked tired, but her eyes were unusually bright. She stood like a sword and bowed to Chu Mu. This was a very solemn and dignified sword salute. After the salute, Jin Xia turned and jumped off the arena. This meant that she admitted defeat. Chu Mu wins, the judge announced. However, he sighed in his heart. Jin Xia's swordsmanship has improved a lot. It's a pity that she lost to Chu Mu. A loss is a loss. This is the rule of the sword residence. The 11th round was the last round. Jin Xia lost to Chu Mu. She had no chance to enter the finals of the King of Swords competition. This caused her to lose an opportunity. However, if she did not face Chu Mu and let go of all her worries, she would not have improved her swordsmanship. At least, it saved her a year of effort. Therefore, it was hard to say what she had gained and what she had lost. Finally, the 11th round of the competition ended. The 10 students who entered the finals of the 10th group were Zhong Liang, Lei Hao, Chu Mu, Nangong Li, Luo Yu, Meng Yan, Lin Yan, Feng Buping, Chen Yaoming, and Zhouan. The judge announced the names of the 10 students who had qualified for the finals of the King of Swordsmanship tournament with a smile on his face. Congratulations to all of you for qualifying for the finals. You will be competing with 90 students from the other 9 groups in the finals of the King of Swordsmanship tournament with your swordsmanship. Defeat your opponents and obtain the glory that belongs to you and our 9 academies. The finals are finally here. I've been waiting for a long time. The preliminaries were already so exciting. I believe the finals will be 10 times more exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait any longer. The spectating students were all extremely excited. Their faces were flushed red. It's a pity that I didn't meet you in the preliminaries. However, this is the best. Our battle should be left for the finals. Lei Hao's sword qi transmitted over. If we can't fight in the finals, then after the finals, I will definitely challenge you. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 248. Chu Mu never knew that there was such a place in the inner house. It was like a large arena on Earth. The entire arena was circular, and in the middle was a 100-meter-long, 100-meter-wide arena. The arena was made of pure white jade steel, and there was a strengthened seal on it. Even if a Qi transformation realm swordsman used all his strength, he would not be able to leave a mark on it. On each of the 4 corners of the 2-meter-tall arena, there was a 10-meter-tall giant sword. The swords had not been sharpened, and they were black in color. They looked heavy and domineering, and there was a sharp aura contained within them. There was a ring at the tip of each sword, and 2 chains extended in different directions from the rings, connecting them to the other swords. They were filled with an ancient and vicissitudes of life, and seemed to have been around for a long time. There was a row of wooden racks on each of the 4 sides of the arena, on which hung unsharpened swords. There was an empty space around the arena that was 30 meters wide, and beyond that, there were trapezoid-shaped seats. They were evenly divided into 10 seats according to the Inner House 10 academies. At this time, the students of the Inner House 10 academies were all sitting on the trapezoid-shaped seat. The first level of the trapezoid-shaped seats were for the headmasters and elders of the various academies. The Sword Arts is King competition was a grand event that was held once every 3 years in the Inner House. It was very important, and the headmasters who were rarely seen would all appear. Not to mention the headmasters of the 10 academies, even the headmaster of the Inner House would appear. Of course, no one knew where the headmaster of the Inner House was watching. In the Inner House 10 academies, there were 100 students from each academy participating in the Sword Arts is King competition. There were a total of 1,000 students, and they were also separated according to their respective academies. However, their seats were a little special. They were in the last row, high up, and very obvious. Qi transformation realm swordsmen had excellent eyesight. Even if they were 1,000 meters away, they could still clearly see a flying fly. Therefore, they could also clearly see everything that was going on in the middle of the arena. Chu Mu, if it weren't for your guidance, I wouldn't have been able to participate in the Sword Arts is King competition. Liang Haishan said excitedly as he sat beside Chu Mu. This was one of his dreams, and he did not expect that it would come true. Everyone present was shocked. The people nearby were shocked when they heard this. Liang Haishan, who had obtained the qualifications for the finals, was taught by Chu Mu? Did that mean that Chu Mu's sword arts were much better than Liang Haishan's? Junior brother Chu, I knew my eyes weren't wrong. You really can participate in the Sword Technique King finals, and you're even called the number 1 dark horse of the 10th group. Zhuge Ming turned around and laughed at Chu Mu. I just don't know what rank I'll be able to obtain in the end. Chu Mu laughed and said casually, I believe in my eyes. Among the dark horses in the academy, you are the best, Zhuge Ming said. When one's realm reached a certain level, there were many things that one simply wouldn't care about. For example, right now, Zhuge Ming's words came from his heart, and when Chu Mu heard this, he knew it was natural. However, it sounded different in the ears of others. At the very least, many of the people from Astral 9 who had been crowned as the Dark Horse were extremely dissatisfied. They all looked at Chu Mu with hostility. Chu Mu did not care about this. Astral Nine's number 1 dark horse? No, he was the number 1 dark horse in the Inner Academy. At that moment, Chu Mu's blood began to boil. At that moment, a figure shot out from somewhere like an aurora, as if he had appeared out of thin air. In a flash, this person appeared in the air above the arena. He was an old man who looked to be in his 70s. His face was flushed, and his tiger-like eyes glowed with a divine light. He was the head judge of the Sword Art is King tournament. Next, it was naturally an introduction to the Sword Arts King competition, and so on. Furthermore, there were also various motivational words attached to it. His voice seemed to contain a strange fluctuation, causing one to feel an irrepressible feeling of blood boiling as soon as they heard it, and arousing the battle intent in the bottom of their hearts. After the opening speech, the head judge announced the rewards for the top 100 in the Sword Art is King tournament. Everyone listened attentively, especially the 1,000 students who would be participating in the finals. They were all extremely focused. The 100th place will receive 10,000 academic credits, 100 low-grade spirit stones, and a mid-grade sword. The 99th place will receive 20,000 academic credits, 200 low-grade spirit stones, and a mid-grade sword. The head judge announced, starting from the 100th place, 10,000 academic credits might not be a lot, but it was not bad to be able to obtain such an amount by participating in the Sword Art is King tournament. Moreover, one would also receive 100 low-grade spirit stones and a mid-grade sword. How much was a mid-grade sword worth? It would cost at least 300,000 academic credit. In other words, as long as one could obtain the 100th place, one would receive such a generous reward. After that, the 99th place would receive 20,000 academic credits, 200 low-grade spirit stones, and a mid-grade sword. The 98th place would receive 30,000 academic credits, 300 low-grade spirit stones, and a mid-grade sword. If the 100th place's reward of 10,000 academic credits and 100 low-grade spirit stones was considered shabby, then the higher the ranking, the higher the reward, the more frightening it would be. As for mid-grade swords, in fact, those who were able to enter the top 100 were basically students on the bronze sword ranking. The swords each of them used were basically high-grade swords. A mid-grade sword was nothing in their eyes. I can definitely enter the top 100, but I don't know where I can place in the top 100 with my level of sword art master. Small success. Chu Mu was confident, but he was not complacent. The entire Great Kuan dynasty's territory was greater than the country he was in on Earth. Moreover, the sword art was flourishing, and there were as many swordsmen as there were hairs on a cow. Therefore, Chu Mu did not dare to say that there were no other sword art masters in the inner mansion other than him. No matter what rank I can obtain in the end, the Sword Art is King tournament is a rare experience. Those who can enter the top 100 must have extraordinary attainments in sword art. Being able to fight with them will allow me to broaden my horizons. It will be of great help to the perfection of my sword art and the deduction of Zhen Tian's righteousness. Chu Mu secretly said. He was a little excited, but he quickly regained his composure. Moreover, the second mid-grade sword can also be obtained from here. The Wind Cutter sword was exchanged for with 500,000 credit. If he could obtain another mid-grade sword in the Sword Art is King tournament, then he would be able to use the dual sword art and balance the two swords. His overall strength would be even stronger. Increasing one rank will increase the reward by 10,000 credits and 100 low-grade spirit stones. Then, if I obtain the 50th rank, will I be able to obtain 510,000 credits and 5,100 low-grade spirit stones? Someone beside him muttered absent-mindedly. No one laughed at him, because everyone else had also fallen into the same fantasy. Only 8 people were able to remain calm. Zhuge Ming and the other 6 were able to remain calm because they had participated in the Sword Art is King tournament before. Therefore, it was not strange for Chu Mu to be able to remain calm. The 11th place will obtain 900,000 credits, 9,000 low-grade spirit stones, and a mid-grade sword. The head judge continued to announce. His voice paused and became louder than before. Next, I will announce the rewards for the top 10. Everyone's attention became even more focused. They stopped their fantasies because they knew that the main event was about to begin. Who knew how much better the rewards for the top 10 would be compared to the rest? The 10th place will be rewarded with 1 million academic credits, 10,000 low-grade spirit stones, 100 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 high-grade sword, and 1 ancient sword art. Many people began to discuss in low voices as the head judge's voice faded away. The 10th place's reward is actually so different from the 11th place's. I'm too excited. If I can enter the top 10, I don't know how much I will get. Wake up. You don't even have the qualifications to participate in the Sword Art is King tournament. Get lost. I can't even fantasize about it. These rewards are the same as the previous tournament. There are no changes. Someone like Zhuge Ming, who was one of the top 100 in the previous tournament, said secretly. The 9th place will obtain 1,100,000 credits, 20,000 low-grade spirit stones, 200 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 high-grade sword, and 1 ancient sword art. The head judge continued to announce. There is a difference of 1 place between the 9th place and the 10th place, but there is an additional 100,000 credits and 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. This is too shocking. Just like the previous one between the 100th place and the 99th place, each increase in rank would only increase the reward by 10,000 credits and 100 low-grade spirit stones. Compared to the rewards for the top 10, it was simply too weak. Moreover, 1 mid-grade spirit stone could be exchanged for 10 low-grade spirit stones. However, very few people were willing to exchange for it because the spiritual energy of a mid-grade spirit stone was many times purer than that of a low-grade spirit stone. It was more precious and harder to obtain. Unless it was a last resort, only a fool would be willing to exchange for it. The 4th place will obtain 1,600,000 credits, 70,000 low-grade spirit stones, 700 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 high-grade sword, and 1 ancient sword art. Now I will announce the rewards for the top 3. The head judge announced in a clear voice. The rewards for the top 3 were different from those for the rest of the rankings. According to the previous tournaments, the rewards for the top 3 were so generous that it made people drool. However, they didn't know if the rewards for the top 3 in this year's Sword Art is the King competition were the same as before, or if there were some adjustments. They could only wait for the head judge to announce everything. However, the head judge did not say anything. It was as if he was deliberately whetting everyone's appetite. Even many of the elders could not help but hold their breaths as they waited for the head judge's final announcement. The 3rd place will obtain 2 million credits, 100,000 low-grade spirit stones, 1,000 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 supreme grade sword, 1 ancient sword art, and 1 technique for exerting force. The 2nd place will obtain 3 million credits, 150,000 low-grade spirit stones, 1,500 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 supreme grade sword, 1 ancient sword art, 1 technique for exerting force, and 10 mortal yang pills. If the rewards for the 3rd and 2nd place were so generous, then what about the 1st place? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.